We all know McDonald's a beacon of comfort, open day and night. But after midnight, the familiar glow turns eerie. The laughter fades, replaced by silence and shadows. The golden arches become a lonely outpost, where the rules of the day no longer apply. For the night shift crew, it's a different world, one of isolation, strange noises, and unsettling moments. These employees are the keepers of the empty lobby, attuned to every creak and flicker. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the midnight shift, where comfort food meets creeping dread. Welcome to the stories that haunt the golden arches after dark. The night shift at McDonald's is a world apart, empty, silent, and isolating. The building, built for crowds, becomes a cavernous shell. Every creak and flicker feels amplified, every shadow suspicious. Young employees, unprepared for the psychological toll, find their minds playing tricks on them. The line between reality and imagination blurs in the dead of night. These are real stories from those who face the darkness alone. What happens when you're the only one awake at McDonald's after midnight? I was 18, working the overnight shift at a small McDonald's on the edge of town. Most nights were uneventful until he appeared. At 2:15 a.m., a man in a red windbreaker and baseball cap would silently stand at the drive-through window, staring in. He never spoke, never ordered, just watched, motionless. His presence was unnatural, his stare chilling. After a minute, he'd turn and vanish into the darkness, leaving the lot empty. I tried to rationalize it, but he kept coming back, night after night. My quiet job was about to become a waking nightmare. His visits became a ritual. Every night at 2:14 a.m., he appeared in the same spot. We joked about it, but the dread was real. Our manager, Kevin, checked the security footage for answers. But every night, during his appearance, the cameras glitched, static frozen frames or distorted blurs. The system showed nothing and the techs found no faults. It felt like we were being watched by something that didn't want to be seen. The fear grew. This was no ordinary late-night visitor. The golden arches had a secret, and it was watching us. Then, the man vanished for a few nights. Relief was short-lived. One night, the drive-through speaker crackled to life. No car, no order, just static and heavy breathing. A whisper, "I see you." Frozen with fear, I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. The lot was empty until I spotted a crouched figure behind the dumpsters. My light caught him, the man in the red windbreaker. He tilted his head in a jerky, unnatural motion, then sprinted into the trees with inhuman speed. I locked every door, heart pounding. The night shift was never the same. Some stories stay with you long after the sun comes up. I was 21 and juggling college classes during the day with night shifts at a McDonald's to make ends meet. It was located in a quiet, sleepy suburb, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. The job was perfect for my schedule. After 10 p.m., I usually worked the drive-through by myself. The stillness of the late hours didn't bother me. In fact, I welcomed it. It gave me time to study between the occasional late-night customer or just get lost in my music, with one earbud in and the other listening for the telltale ding of a car. That simple, predictable routine was my anchor. It kept me grounded until the night the routine shattered, and I started hearing a familiar voice through my own headset. It happened on a quiet Sunday, creeping close to midnight. I was sweeping the floor near the drive-through window, the rhythmic scrape of the broom being the only sound in the empty restaurant. Suddenly, my headset crackled to life, a burst of static that made me flinch. A woman's voice, calm and strangely firm, cut through the noise. Number 7. No pickles. I didn't hear a car pull up, which was unusual, so I turned to check the camera monitor mounted above the register. The screen showed nothing, just the empty, dimly lit drive-through lane. No car. No glowing headlights. No person standing at the speaker. Confused, I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet space. Please pull forward to the first window." But there was no reply. No car came. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I walked over to the glass window and peered out into the darkness, searching for any sign of a customer who might have walked off. The parking lot was a sea of silent, empty asphalt. There was nobody at the speaker box, nobody walking away. I tried to rationalize it, to push the weirdness away. It must have been radio interference, I told myself. Maybe a stray signal from a trucker's CB radio, or another drive-through nearby. It was a flimsy explanation, but it was all I had. I shook my head, took a deep breath, and forced myself to go back to my cleaning, trying to forget the disembodied voice and its oddly specific order. The very next night, it happened again. Same time, same unsettling calm. The headset crackled, and the same voice echoed in my ear. Number 7. No pickles. The tone was identical, a perfect replay of the night before. This time, I froze completely, the broom handle clutched tightly in my hands. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I hadn't imagined it. My eyes darted to the security camera feed just in time to see the screen flicker. For a split second, there was a strange pulse of light at the speaker, like a camera flash in the dark, and then it was gone. The lane remained empty. My hand trembled as I radioed my manager, telling him the speaker was acting up. He checked the system from his office and said something that made my blood run cold. The order was real. It had been logged in the system, but when I asked where it came from, he just brushed it off as another tech error. I tried to tell my coworker Becca about the voice in the headset. She was my friend, and I thought if anyone would believe me, it would be her. But she just laughed it off, teasing me about being overtired and letting the spooky quiet of the night shift get to me. She didn't take it seriously at all, that is, until the following weekend, when she worked the early morning shift, the one that bridges the gap between the dead of night and the dawn. She was leaving for the day through the back employee entrance around 6 a.m. She pushed the door open, stepped into the cool morning air, and then stumbled back inside moments later, her face pale, looking like she had just seen a ghost. Her own ghost. She told me, her voice shaking, that there had been someone in the drive-through lane. Not in a car, just standing there, staring directly at the pickup window. The figure had the same build as her. The same color hair pulled back in the same messy ponytail she always wore for work. It was, for all intents and purposes, her exact double, standing silently in the empty lane. Becca said she stared for what felt like a lifetime, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. Then she blinked, just once. A single, reflexive action. And when her eyes opened again, the figure was gone. Vanished without a trace. She didn't laugh at my story anymore after that. A few days later, the experience seeped into my subconscious. I had a dream that was so vivid, so terrifyingly real, that I woke up with my heart pounding against my ribs. In the dream, I was at work, wearing my headset, trapped in an endless night shift. The drive-through speaker kept clicking on, and a distorted, sorrowful voice repeated the same phrase over and over again. "You forgot me, you forgot me, you forgot me." In the dream, I tried desperately to pull the headset off, to silence the accusing whisper, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it had melted into my skin, becoming a part of me. I woke up in a cold sweat, the static from the dream still buzzing in my ears. That night, I came dangerously close to calling out sick. The memory of the dream was too fresh, the feeling of dread too heavy, but I didn't want to seem paranoid or unreliable, so I forced myself to go in. I told myself it was just stress, my mind creating monsters out of exhaustion. I tried to keep myself busy, cleaning and stocking with a frantic energy. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a familiar sense of foreboding settled over me. And then it came. The crackle in my headset. The same calm, firm voice. Number 7. No pickles. This time, I didn't answer. I didn't look at the camera. I just stood perfectly still, hoping that if I ignored it, it would go away. But then, on the order screen, the words appeared, and the pickup timer began its relentless countdown. Someone, or something, was waiting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely stand upright. The order was on the screen, a digital ghost demanding to be served. The timer was ticking down, each second a tiny hammer blow against my sanity. It was no longer just a voice in my ear. It was a demand, an expectation. Something was out there, in the dark, and it wanted its food. I felt a strange, horrifying pull, an obligation to complete the transaction. My feet felt like they were made of lead as I walked slowly, deliberately, toward the drive-through window. My heart was a frantic drumbeat in my chest, so loud I was sure it was audible in the silent restaurant. I was terrified of what I might see, but even more terrified of the unknown. I reached the window and hesitated, my hand hovering over the cold metal frame. I took a deep, shaky breath and forced myself to look outside. This time, the lane wasn't empty. There was a car there, a dark, nondescript sedan, its engine humming silently. It hadn't been there a moment ago. My eyes scanned the interior, trying to see the driver, and what I saw made me physically stumble backward, a gasp escaping my lips. It was me. Sitting behind the wheel was a perfect reflection of myself. She was wearing the same faded college hoodie I had on, the same silver hoop earrings. She had my tired eyes, my messy bun. It was an impossible, terrifying mirror image. She, the other me, just stared back at me from the driver's seat. Her expression was completely blank at first, a hollow, empty mask. It was like looking at a doll that had been made to look like me. Then, her lips curled into a smile. It was the most horrifying smile I have ever witnessed. It was cold, empty, and utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. It didn't reach her eyes, which remained like dark, vacant pools. As she held my gaze, her voice came through the speaker again, not in my headset this time, but from the restaurant's external speaker, a low and chilling statement that wasn't an order. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. And then, in the blink of an eye, the car was gone. It didn't drive away. It didn't speed off into the night. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a solid, real object in the drive-through lane. And the next, there was nothing but empty pavement under the dim yellow lights. The order vanished from the screen. The timer stopped. It was as if the entire encounter had been wiped from reality. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stood there, shaking and crying, my mind struggling to comprehend the impossible thing I had just witnessed. I called my manager, my voice a choked whisper, and told him I had to go home. He didn't ask any questions. He just told me to clock out. I never worked another night shift again. Even now, years later, I still hear my own voice in my dreams. Number 7. No pickles. I don't know what version of me was in that car, but a part of me is certain she's still out there, waiting in the dark. When I was 19, I took a job at a McDonald's not too far from the apartment I shared with a couple of roommates. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent and the hours fit my chaotic schedule. The building itself felt ancient. It was the kind of place where the floor tiles seemed to hold a permanent layer of grime, no matter how many times you mopped them. Most of my shifts were at night, usually with just one other crew member and our shift manager, a weary, middle-aged guy named Derek. On my very first day, Derek walked me through the standard tour, the walk-in freezer, the sizzling grills, the complex security system. But just before we reached the small windowless room where the camera monitors were kept, he stopped me. He turned, his expression suddenly serious, and said something I will never, ever forget. "Listen," he said, his voice low and firm, making direct eye contact. "If you're ever here closing by yourself, I need you to promise me something." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet hallway. "Don't watch the security footage from between 2 and 3 a.m. Just don't." I let out a nervous laugh, assuming it was some kind of rookie hazing, a joke to spook the new guy. But his face remained completely straight, his eyes dead serious. "I mean it," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It's not worth it." My curiosity immediately flared. I asked him why, what was on the tapes, but he just gave a slow shake of his head, turned, and walked off toward the office, leaving the question hanging in the air like a thick fog. Of course, telling a 19-year-old not to do something is the surest way to make them want to do it. The mystery of the forbidden hour began to eat at me. What could possibly be on that footage that was so bad? A botched robbery? An employee stealing from the register? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more dramatic than the last. But I was smart enough to wait. I needed to earn Derek's trust, to become a familiar face on the night shift. I wanted to make sure that when I finally decided to look, I could do it without anyone watching over my shoulder, without having to explain my curiosity. I played the part of the good employee, learning the ropes, and never mentioning his strange warning again. So I waited a few weeks, biding my time, until the perfect opportunity presented itself. It was a Tuesday night, notoriously slow, and my coworker had called in sick. Derek left me to close up the store by myself. The moment the locks clicked into place and the last of the lights were turned off in the dining area, a thrill of nervous energy shot through me. This was it. I made my way to the back office, the silence of the empty building amplifying the sound of my own footsteps. I sat down in the worn-out office chair, the screen of the security monitor glowing in the dark room. My heart pounded in my chest as I used the mouse to scrub back through the night's recorded footage. 1:58, 1:59. Nothing but an empty, silent lobby. Then the clock ticked over. The timestamp on the corner of the screen advanced slowly, 2:09, 2:10. The lobby remained perfectly still, a silent tableau of cheap tables and plastic chairs under the dim security lighting. I started to feel, a bit foolish, honestly, wondering if Derek's warning had been an elaborate prank after all. Then, at exactly 2:11 a.m., it happened. A figure just walked into the frame from the main entrance. He was a man, dressed in a plain gray hoodie and dark jeans. My first thought was that it was a customer. Maybe the timestamp on the camera was wrong and someone had come in just before I locked up. But then a chilling realization washed over me. I watched the footage again. The front doors never opened. They stayed shut and completely motionless. He had walked right through them. My breath caught in my throat. I was the only person in the building. I knew that for a fact. Yet here was a man on my screen, standing in the middle of my lobby. He didn't move like a normal person. His steps were unnaturally slow, measured, and eerily silent. There was this, gliding quality to his motion, like his feet weren't quite connecting with the floor. He walked to the exact center of the dining area, then stopped and turned to face the front counter, where I would have been standing if a customer had come in. And there he stood, completely motionless, a silent sentinel in the empty restaurant. He wasn't looking around or checking his phone. He was just watching the counter, waiting. I ripped my eyes away from the monitor and, peered through the small window from the office into the lobby itself. It was empty. The tables were bare, the chairs were neatly stacked, exactly as I had left them. There was no man in a gray hoodie. There was nothing but shadows and silence. My heart hammered against my ribcage. I was seeing two different realities at once, the empty room before my eyes and the occupied one on the screen. I forced myself to look back at the monitor, my hand trembling as I used the mouse to scrub the footage forward. He stayed in that same spot, a ghostly statue, for what felt like an eternity. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't move a muscle. The timestamp continued its crawl, 2:30, 2:35, 2:40. At exactly 2:41 a.m. he finally moved. He turned, not toward the door he'd entered through, but directly toward the security camera that was recording him. He took one slow step, then another. His face was obscured by the hood and the poor quality of the video, just a blur of pixelated features. As he took a third step, he simply vanished. He didn't walk out of the frame or duck out of view. In the middle of his stride, he was there one moment and gone the next. The lobby on the screen was empty once again. The recording continued, showing nothing but the silent, still room for the rest of the hour. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone. I had to call Derek. I didn't care what time it was or if I was breaking some unspoken rule. I had to know what I had just seen. I described everything in a frantic, stumbling rush, the man appearing at 2:11, walking through the doors, standing motionless in the lobby, and then vanishing into thin air. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't the silence of confusion or disbelief. It was the silence of resignation. Finally, I heard him let out a deep, tired sigh. "I told you not to look, kid," he said, his voice laced with a profound weariness. And that's when he finally told me the truth. He told me that about 10 years ago, long before I started working there, a man had come into the McDonald's late one night. He went into the men's bathroom and never came out. The employee on the overnight shift was alone and swamped with cleaning duties and never noticed. The man's body wasn't discovered until the next morning when the opening manager arrived. He was found slumped over in the third stall, his phone still clutched in his hand, fallen just out of his reach. The screen was still lit up, showing that he had been in the middle of trying to call for help when he died from an overdose. He had died alone, just a few feet away from a potential rescuer who never knew he was there. Ever since that night, strange things had been happening in the restaurant, but only between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. The time of his death, orders for food that no one placed would suddenly appear on the kitchen monitor. Full trash cans would get tipped over inside rooms that were locked from the outside, and on the security camera footage the man would appear. Always at 2:11 a.m., the time he was estimated to have entered the restaurant. He would show up in the lobby, a silent, repeating echo of his last moments. Sometimes he was standing, like I saw. Other times, he was sitting at a table. But he always, without fail, vanished before the hour was up. I asked Derek why nobody had done anything about it, why they kept the place open. He told me they had tried everything. They had the entire camera system ripped out and replaced with a new one. They brought in priests to bless the building. They even shut the entire restaurant down for a week for a deep cleaning, hoping that breaking the routine would make him move on. But nothing ever worked. The moment they reopened, he was back. "He's not an angry spirit," Derek said quietly, his voice full of a strange, sad empathy. "He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's just stuck." That single thought haunted me more than any jump scare or violent ghost story ever could. The idea of being eternally stuck, forever replaying the moments before your lonely death, just watching a place you died in, over and over and over again, forever. What is it about the night shift that seems to invite the supernatural? These stories, born from the humming silence of a late-night McDonald's, tap into a primal fear of isolation. They remind us that familiar places can become alien and menacing when stripped of their daytime context. A restaurant built for noise and crowds becomes an echoing tomb when empty. The cheerful branding, designed to be welcoming, feels like a mocking grin in the dim, sterile light. It is in this profound quiet, this deep loneliness, that the mind becomes a fertile ground for terror. Every unexplained noise, every flicker of a light, every shadow in the corner of your eye is amplified, taking on a sinister weight it wouldn't have in the bright light of day. It is the perfect stage for a haunting. The tales of the man in the red windbreaker, the drive-through doppelganger, and the figures stuck in a time loop all share a common thread: the blurring of reality. Is it a ghost, a glitch in the system, or a mind worn down by exhaustion and solitude? The security cameras that should provide objective truth instead offer corrupted files and impossible images. The headset that connects you to the outside world instead brings you voices from nowhere, or worse, your own. These experiences attack the very senses we rely on to understand our world, leaving the witnesses stranded in a fog of uncertainty. They are left questioning not just what they saw, but their own sanity. Urban legends often serve as cautionary tales, modern folklore that speaks to our collective anxieties. The stories from the graveyard shift at McDonald's are no different. They are about more than just ghosts. They are about the vulnerability we feel when we are alone in the dark. They explore the fear of being watched by unseen eyes, the terror of confronting a version of yourself that is not you, and the profound sadness of a soul who is lost and forgotten. These narratives transform a global symbol of convenience and comfort into a place of profound dread, a liminal space where the ordinary rules no longer apply and anything can happen. Perhaps these events are nothing more than tricks of the light or products of a sleep-deprived imagination. Maybe there is a logical explanation for every glitching camera and disembodied voice. But for the people who lived through these nights, the experience was undeniably real. The terror was real. The cold sweat and the pounding heart were real. The truth behind these urban legends may not be about proving the existence of ghosts, but about acknowledging that some places, at certain hours, hold an energy that defies easy explanation. They hold an echo of something that was, or something that should not be. The golden arches are a beacon, a promise of something familiar and safe, no matter where you are in the world. They represent consistency, a predictable experience you can count on, but these stories suggest something else is lurking just beyond that comforting glow. They tell us that behind the clean counters and standardized menus, there can be a darkness that management can't scrub away, and no amount of corporate training can prepare you for. It's the kind of fear that lingers, that follows you home after you clock out, that changes the way you see a place you thought you knew so well. It's a reminder that even the most mundane locations can have a history, a memory that is anything but ordinary. Why do these stories resonate so deeply with us? It's because they take the mundane and twist it into the monstrous. We have all been to a McDonald's. We have all sat in those booths and stood at that counter. The familiarity is what makes the horror so effective. If a place as common and brightly lit as a fast food restaurant can become a gateway for the inexplicable and the terrifying, then where is truly safe? It suggests that the veil between our world and another is not confined to ancient castles or fog-shrouded graveyards. It can be as thin as the glass of a drive-through window on a lonely Tuesday night. The employees in these stories are left with unresolved terror. The man in the red windbreaker is still missing, his ghostly image perhaps still appearing at 2:14 a.m. for some new unsuspecting employee. The doppelganger in the car is still out there, waiting for her order. The man who never left is still pacing the lobby, stuck in his final moments for eternity. There is no neat resolution, no ghost busted, no mystery solved. There is only the lingering question, the chilling uncertainty that these phenomena are ongoing, a permanent feature of the locations themselves. The horror doesn't end when the story does. It simply waits for the next person to work the night shift. So, the next time you find yourself on a dark highway, the only light for miles coming from those familiar golden arches, you might pause for a moment. You might think about the person on the other side of that speaker, alone in the quiet building. You might wonder what they see when they look out into the darkness, or what they hear when the restaurant is silent. You might ask yourself what truly happens after midnight, when the world is asleep and the only things awake are the lonely and the lost. Because after hearing these stories, you can never be entirely sure what's real and what's just waiting for you at the window. Have you ever felt watched, like really watched, even when there's no one around? That kind of awareness that starts in your spine and trickles down until your hands start to sweat and you can't explain why? That's what I felt every night on the late shift at Walmart, but I always brushed it off, until the night it almost got me killed. I worked the overnight stocking shift at a 24-hour Walmart in a small town outside Atlanta. It's a boring, quiet job perfect for someone like me who prefers solitude and hates customer interaction. Most nights are dead quiet by 2 a.m., just a few weirdos wandering the aisles or sleeping in the parking lot. But starting around mid-July last summer, something changed. Something started watching me. It began subtly. I'd be stocking cereal and feel like someone was behind me, only to turn and see nothing but a long, empty aisle. A shopping cart would be pushed just slightly out of place, like someone had moved it while my back was turned. Cameras caught nothing. Security shrugged. I thought maybe I was just tired. But then, I started finding things. Personal things. Once, I found a Polaroid photo of myself, not from work, but one taken from across the parking lot when I was getting into my car. Another night, I found a napkin tucked behind a display of soup cans, scribbled with my name and my license plate number in shaky handwriting. I reported it, obviously. Management reviewed footage. Still nothing. Could be a prank, they said. Maybe a coworker. But it wasn't funny. I stopped parking in the same spot. Started locking my car the second I sat down. My manager let me carry a box cutter just in case. I started keeping it in my hoodie pocket instead of my belt. It all came to a head 2 weeks later. It was around 3:15 a.m. I was restocking the frozen food section, earbuds in, listening to a podcast, when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, someone darting behind the row of freezer doors. My heart dropped. I pulled one earbud out and listened. Nothing. The store was supposed to be empty. I crept toward the end of the aisle, heart pounding, gripping my box cutter. As I rounded the corner, I caught a glimpse of a man, skinny, pale, wearing a hoodie with the hood up and no shoes. His eyes locked onto mine before he bolted down toward the garden center. I dropped everything and ran after him. By the time I got there, the sliding doors to the outdoor section were wide open. I stepped into the dark, cold air and scanned the parking lot. Nothing but fog and silence. That's when I heard my name whispered. Not yelled, not spoken, whispered. From behind the pallet of mulch bags. I spun around and saw him again, closer this time. So close I could see his face, half covered by a filthy cloth mask. I didn't even think. I just ran. Back into the store, toward the front where I knew the security guard would be. I didn't even look back. I just ran like my life depended on it. When I got to the front, the guard was slumped over in his chair, headphones in, half asleep. I grabbed his shoulder and practically screamed, "There's someone in the store." He jumped up, dazed, and called the cops. We waited together while they searched the place, aisle by aisle. Nothing. No sign of the guy. No footprints in the mulch. No one on the cameras. It was like he'd never been there. But I knew he had. I could still smell the sweat on his hoodie, the sour stink of his breath from when he whispered my name. After that night, I quit. Management said I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a homeless guy. Maybe it was a nightmare. But I know what I saw. And I know he had been watching me for weeks, studying my habits, learning when I'd be alone. I moved back in with my parents and took a day job somewhere else. But I still can't walk into a Walmart without scanning the corners for shadows or checking behind every aisle. Every time I hear someone whisper, even on TV, I get that feeling in my spine again. I don't know who he was. I don't know what he wanted, but I know one thing for sure. He's still out there. And I don't think I was his first target. Have you ever locked eyes with someone and instantly felt like you weren't supposed to? Like somehow, by simply noticing them, you'd made yourself a target? That happened to me in a Walmart, and what followed still messes with my sleep every single night. This took place in 2021 in a town called Waco, Texas. My wife was out of town for a conference, and I was home alone with our 6-year-old daughter, Emma. On a rainy Saturday night, I decided to make a quick run to Walmart before it got too late. Emma was watching cartoons, so I told her I'd be 20 minutes max. I grabbed my hoodie, keys, and headed out. The store was quieter than usual. Rain tends to keep people in. I remember passing the greeter, who didn't even look up from his stool. I made my way through the front aisles toward the pharmacy section to grab some cough syrup. As I turned down aisle 6, I saw her, an older woman, probably in her 60s, standing completely still in front of the cold medicine. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't comparing prices. She was just staring straight ahead at the shelves, not blinking, not moving. Her cart was empty, and she was holding one of those giant handbags close to her chest. I froze halfway down the aisle. Something about her gave me a weird gut feeling, but I tried not to be rude, so I just cleared my throat and said, "Excuse me," hoping she'd move. She didn't even flinch. I slowly reached for the syrup a few feet to her left, keeping my eyes on her. That's when she turned her head slowly and looked right at me. Her eyes were the most lifeless things I'd ever seen. Not angry, not sad, just empty. And then she smiled, but it wasn't normal. It was wide, wrong. Like her skin didn't quite fit her face. I grabbed the bottle and backed away, mumbling, "Have a good night," and practically walked to the self-checkout. When I turned to look, she was still standing there, holding her bag, staring at me. I paid, bagged my items, and hurried out to the parking lot. The rain had picked up and thunder was rolling in. I unlocked the car and climbed in, trying to shake off the weirdness. That's when I saw her again through the glass of the automatic doors. She was standing just inside the entrance now, still staring, still smiling. I floored it out of the lot and kept checking my rear view, but no one followed. I felt a little silly by the time I got home. Maybe she was just mentally unwell or confused. I tucked Emma in, double-locked the door, and went to bed. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. At around 3:12 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Not from inside the house, but from my driveway. A soft metallic click, followed by the sound of slow footsteps on gravel. I looked out my bedroom window, and my stomach dropped. That same woman, same clothes, same bag was walking slowly up to my porch. She wasn't carrying an umbrella. Her hair was soaked and hanging in her face, but she moved with purpose. I grabbed my phone and called the police immediately. I watched as she reached the door and just stood there, staring, not knocking, not speaking, just waiting. Then she did something I'll never forget. She slowly lifted her hand and placed her fingers over the peephole in the front door, like she knew I was watching from upstairs. I backed away from the window and grabbed a baseball bat from under the bed. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. 10 minutes later, the police showed up, sirens, lights, everything. But by the time they checked the porch, she was gone. No footprints, no trace. They asked if I had any enemies, or maybe upset someone. I told them no. They checked our security cam. Guess what? Static. The footage cut out from 3:11 to 3:25 a.m., just a blackout. The officer looked uncomfortable but chalked it up to a power surge. The next day, I went back to Walmart to ask the manager if they had any other complaints about that woman. He looked confused and said, "There was no woman here last night. We close at 11 now, have for months." I told him I'd been in the store at 10:30. He shook his head. "No way. Doors were locked. Only staff were here." I pulled up my receipt. It showed a purchase time of 10:37 p.m., but from 2 weeks earlier. I still have it saved in my phone. I showed him, and he just walked away, saying, "Maybe try a different store next time." I don't know who or what she was, but I never saw her again after that. I moved to another town within the month, and I don't shop alone at night anymore. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I swear I see a woman standing by the side of the road, empty cart, empty eyes, waiting for someone to notice her again. You ever work a job so quiet at night that you start to wonder if you're the only person awake in the whole city? That's what the graveyard shift at Walmart feels like sometimes. But the worst thing I've ever seen on the job didn't happen in some loud moment. It happened during complete silence. In aisle 12 at exactly 3:33 a.m. I was hired in late 2020 as overnight security for a 24-hour Walmart in Flagstaff, Arizona. I was used to quiet nights, maybe the occasional drunk college kid or shoplifter. But for the most part, people were polite, or just too tired to cause trouble. I had my routine: walk the floor once every hour, check the loading dock, review the cameras, simple stuff. Everything changed after the store upgraded our surveillance system. We got these newer cameras, motion activated, heat sensing, infrared. I could even pull up specific aisles with a tap. I loved it at first, made my job easier. But about a week after the install, I noticed something off. The cameras in aisle 12, the cleaning products aisle, would randomly trigger between 3:30 and 3:35 a.m. every single night. The first few times I figured it was a glitch. Maybe the HVAC kicking on, or some product reflecting light, oddly. But then the heat signature started. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the sensor would register a human-shaped figure for 3 seconds, just standing there, no movement, then gone. I finally decided to check it out myself. I brought a flashlight and made my rounds as usual. Then, at 3:32 a.m., I walked toward aisle 12. My walkie crackled for a second. Dead static. Then nothing. As I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. The air felt thick, heavier. I know how stupid that sounds. It's a Walmart, not a cave, but I swear the whole place felt off. I scanned my light down the aisle. Nothing. Bleach bottles, detergent, paper towels. Everything looked untouched. But when I got to the middle of the aisle, I felt it cold, like I'd just walked into a freezer. Then, one by one, the overhead lights above me started dimming. Not all at once, one at a time. Like something was walking behind me, killing the lights as it passed. I turned around and saw nothing. I'm not a jumpy guy. I've done security at bars and festivals, but in that moment, I honestly thought I was going to pass out. I took one step back toward the front of the aisle, and then bam, the mop bucket at the end of the aisle rolled out and tipped over like someone had kicked it hard. I ran. I don't care how I looked. I ran straight back to the security office and locked the door. Pulled up the camera feed for aisle 12, rewound the last 2 minutes. What I saw made my skin crawl. At 3:33, 6 a.m., the feed showed a figure tall, blurry, grayish standing exactly where I had been. But here's the part that broke me. It was staring directly into the camera, even though it was mounted 12 feet up in the ceiling. I didn't say a word to my manager the next day. Who'd believe me? I made a decision then I'd just avoid aisle 12 during my shifts. Let the ghosts have their 3 minutes a night. One night, about 2 weeks later, the new guy, Jason, showed up for his first solo shift. I gave him the rundown and mentioned jokingly, "Hey, don't go near aisle 12 around 3:30, unless you want to meet the building's other resident." He laughed it off. The next morning, I came in early to hand off keys. Jason wasn't at the security office. I checked the cameras. Nothing for the last 30 minutes. I called his cell, no answer. Walked the store, empty. Finally, I checked aisle 12, and there he was. Jason was standing there, frozen, stiff, facing the shelves. Not blinking, not talking. I approached slowly and asked, "Hey man, you okay?" He slowly turned his head to me. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't blinked in hours. Then he whispered, "It," whispered my name. In my head, "It knows me now." We had to call his fiancée to come get him. He didn't speak the whole drive home. He quit the next day. Didn't even pick up his final paycheck. The store still won't close aisle 12 at night. It's just a camera glitch, they say. But every time I work the overnight shift, I skip that aisle. I turn the volume off on that feed, and I never stay past 3:30 a.m. if I can help it. If you're ever shopping at night, and you find yourself in the cleaning aisle around that time, don't stop. Don't look around. And whatever you do, don't answer if you hear your name. Have you ever seen someone in a place they just didn't belong? Someone who looked almost right, but not quite human? I used to think the lost and found was the most boring part of Walmart until I saw her sitting inside it, and she smiled at me like we'd met before. I was working customer service late one Friday. It was one of those 24-hour Walmarts in southern Illinois, just off a lonely highway. Dead quiet after 2 a.m., no customers, only a few stalkers in the back, and me manning the returns and lost, found desk. Most nights, I scrolled through my phone, occasionally logging in a left-behind purse or someone's kid's jacket. That night, someone left behind a woman. At 2:47 a.m., I heard a soft knock. That was already weird. Nobody knocks at Walmart. I looked up from the counter and saw a woman standing inside the lost and found cage. We keep it behind a half door, with a latch. It's never locked, but no one goes in there except employees. She was barefoot, wearing an old blue sundress, her long hair hanging over one side of her face. She was just standing among the bins of lost scarves, old toys, and plastic bags, looking around like she was browsing. I walked over, asking, "Ma'am, can I help you?" She turned her head slowly and smiled, not wide, just a small, twitchy smile. "I lost something," she whispered. Her voice was thin, like someone trying to talk through static. I asked her what she lost, and she just said, "I can't remember, but it's important. It was mine first." Something about her tone chilled me. She didn't sound confused or scared. She sounded angry, but like she was trying to hide it. I reached over and gently motioned for her to step out of the cage. She didn't move, just stared. Then I noticed her feet were dirty, filthy, like she'd been walking barefoot down a gravel road for miles. There were small scratches on her ankles too. I radioed for my manager. While waiting, I kept my eyes on her, but the moment I looked away to check the time, she vanished. Gone. I walked into the cage. Empty. I looked behind the counter, behind the bins. No one. The latch hadn't moved. I even checked the hallway to the bathrooms. Nothing. My manager came over, and when I explained, he said I probably nodded off and dreamt it. But I wasn't tired. I wasn't hallucinating. I saw her, smelled her like wet flowers and mold. That might have been the end of it, but a few nights later, a woman came to the counter in tears. She said her daughter had wandered off while she was looking at candles. Security helped her search. 10 minutes later, the little girl was found sitting calmly inside the lost and found cage, holding a yellow flower. No one had seen her walk in. When asked where she got the flower, she said, "The lady in blue gave it to me. I nearly quit that night." But the final straw happened a week later. I was closing out a return with a guy who looked like he was on something scruffy, twitchy, kept looking over his shoulder. He paused mid-sentence, staring behind me. I turned and saw nothing. He backed away and whispered, "She's standing right there." I asked, "Who?" His eyes were huge. "The barefoot woman in the blue dress. She's looking through the bags." I turned again. Still, nothing. The guy refused his refund, dropped his item on the floor, and left the store without another word. I checked the cameras from my terminal. At 2:47 a.m., the same time I first saw her, the feed showed the customer at the counter, staring past me. But in frame, near the lost and found bins, was movement. Not a full figure, just the edge of a blue dress, fluttering like someone had walked by, except no one else was on shift near me. I haven't seen her since, but every night that I work the desk, I get this feeling around 2:45 a.m. Like someone is standing just out of sight. I don't turn around anymore. I don't check the bins after dark. And if you're ever at a Walmart late and you see someone barefoot in the customer service area, don't ask her what she lost. She's not looking for an item. She's looking for you.
I was 22 when I ended things with Sam. We had been together for over a year and a half, and on paper, it looked like the kind of relationship everyone wanted. Constant attention, sweet texts, surprise date nights. But over time, that attention became surveillance. Those texts turned demanding. The surprises began feeling like traps, and by the end, it wasn't love anymore. It was fear in disguise. When we met, he swept me off my feet. He remembered the tiniest things I said. How I liked my coffee, the way I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was nervous. He brought me flowers every Sunday and left little notes in my jacket pockets. It was romantic, but even in the beginning, something felt too much. He once bought me a dress in my exact size even though I'd never told him. He said he guessed. Looking back, I realize he probably went through my closet. I should have known. But I was young. I told myself I was lucky, that he just loved me hard. But as the months went on, his affection became possessiveness. If I took too long to reply, he'd send 10 texts in a row. If I posted on social media without telling him where I was, he'd accuse me of hiding things. He'd screenshot photos of male friends who liked my posts and demand to know who they were. Every day began to feel like a cross-examination. The final straw came on a rainy Tuesday night. I was asleep when I felt him get out of bed. I pretended to be asleep, thinking maybe he was just going to the bathroom. But I heard him unzip my purse. Then the quiet tapping of phone buttons. He was going through my messages. I sat up and said his name. He froze. I saw fear on his face, but it wasn't guilt. It was the fear of being caught, of losing control. I broke up with him the next morning. He didn't fight, didn't cry, just stared at me and said, "Are you sure?" I nodded. He left without another word. I remember standing by the door long after it shut, waiting to hear him come back. He never did, at least not that day. The next week was calm, too calm. I blocked his number, removed him from socials, even told mutual friends not to give out my new address when I moved a month later. I wanted a fresh start. For a while it worked. But one night, I was locking up after a late shift at the cafe where I worked, and I saw a car idling across the street, headlights off, just sitting there. When I walked toward it, it pulled away slowly. I didn't see the driver, but I didn't have to. I knew it was him. Then the calls started, blocked number, no voice, just breathing, always around midnight. Every time I answered, I told myself it might be someone else. A prank maybe, but deep down I knew. It was Sam. I started leaving lights on, moved my bed away from the window, slept with a hammer under my pillow. I went to the police. They took a report but said without evidence or a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested a restraining order, but without proof of who was calling or showing up, it was just a piece of paper. I started logging everything, call times, texts, photos of the same car driving past my apartment. Then came the note, taped to my front door in the middle of the night. "You really thought I couldn't find you?" In his handwriting. No envelope, no stamp. which meant he'd been at my door. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I took sick leave from work. I considered moving again. That weekend, I installed a security camera above my door. The next night, at 2:17 a.m., the camera caught someone standing just out of frame. A shadow, not enough for facial ID. But the next morning, I found a gift box on my doorstep. Inside was a Polaroid of me, taken inside the cafe. I was laughing with a customer, my back to the entrance. The photo was printed on glossy paper. On the back, he'd written, "You smile for everyone but me." I changed my locks, slept at a friend's place. But even there, I started getting texts again, this time from a different number. "I miss you. You don't have to be afraid of me. You were perfect, but you made me ugly." My friends told me to change my number again, but I didn't see the point. He always found it. I thought about buying a weapon. Instead, I bought blackout curtains and kept a chair jammed under the door every night. Then one night, I came home and saw muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. Just one set. They didn't match my shoes. I checked the windows. One was cracked open. I hadn't used it in weeks. I checked the closet. On the floor was an old hoodie, one I'd thrown out months ago, folded neatly. I called the police again. This time, they brought in a canine unit. The dog picked up a scent but lost it outside the building. They told me to stay with someone else for a while, so I did. But when I came back 2 weeks later, there was a message carved into my bathroom mirror. Not written, carved. It said, "Don't disappear on me again." That was the night I knew I had to leave. Not the apartment, the state. I quit my job, packed everything I owned, and moved across the country. I changed my name on social media, deleted old photos, even paid to have my info scrubbed from people search sites. For the first time in months, I could breathe. It lasted nearly a year. Then last week I found something in my mailbox. No name, no address, just a key, my old apartment key, the one I lost a year ago. Attached was a tag that read, "You always forget things. He's still out there, watching, waiting. And if I ever disappear, I need someone to know." It was him.
She was still in love. Back in college, I dated a girl named Maya. We met during our second semester, in a creative writing class. She had this captivating energy, dark curly hair, eyes that lingered just a second too long, and a laugh that sounded like she didn't care who heard. I was drawn to her in the way people are drawn to trouble dressed up as confidence. At first, she was the best thing that had happened to me, attentive, passionate, obsessive in the way that feels flattering when you're young and dumb. The honeymoon phase didn't last long. Within a few months, the red flags started popping up. She didn't like me going to parties without her. She didn't like when I hung out with female classmates, even for group projects. If I didn't answer a text within 10 minutes, she'd send 3 more, then call. And if I didn't answer, she'd show up wherever I was. I excused it as intensity. I thought maybe she'd just been hurt before. I didn't realize how far she would go. When I finally broke things off, it was winter break. We were both staying on campus because our homes were out of state. I figured the holidays would offer a clean break. I met her at a cafe and told her it was over. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just looked at me and said, "You'll come back. You're still mine." I brushed it off as bitterness, but deep down, I felt something cold take root in my chest. The next few days were quiet. I blocked her number, removed her from my socials. I thought it was done. But then the messages started coming again from random numbers this time. "Thinking about you. Still waiting. You miss me too." I ignored them, convinced she'd eventually get tired. But the messages didn't stop. They escalated. I started seeing her on campus again. Not in the dining hall or the library, but lurking. Standing outside buildings I was leaving. Sitting in parked cars that vanished when I looked twice. Once, during a late-night study session in a common room, I looked out the window and saw her across the courtyard. Just staring up at me, not moving, not blinking. I turned around to tell my study partner, and when I looked back, she was gone. Then came the photo. It was in my campus mailbox. No name, no note. Just a single printed photo of me. Asleep. In my bed. My window was behind my head in the image, open just a crack. I don't remember leaving it unlocked. I went cold. I started pushing furniture against the door at night. I set up an app on my old phone to record sounds while I slept. One night, it caught heavy breathing for over 6 minutes. The phone was on my nightstand. I contacted campus security. They gave her a warning. She played dumb. Said I was just bitter, trying to make her look crazy. But even they seemed uneasy. One officer told me in private, "You might want to stay somewhere else for a while." So I did. I crashed on a friend's couch off campus for a week. When I returned, I found a gift box on my bed. Inside was the hoodie I thought I'd lost during our first date. It smelled like her perfume. No one had access to my room but me and her, apparently. One night, I came back late from a shift at the library and found her sitting on the steps of my dorm. Calm, casual. She said she just wanted to talk. I told her to leave, that I'd call the police. She smiled and said, "You'd never do that. You're too soft." And she was right. I just walked past her, locked my door, sat on the floor with my back against it until morning. I filed a formal no-contact order through the school. She was told to stay away from me. For a few weeks, it worked. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of my door creaking. It was 3:12 a.m. My roommate was out of town. I sat up, and she was in the room, in the shadows, standing over me, whispering my name. My chest locked up. I couldn't move at first. When I finally found my voice and screamed, she bolted. I don't know how she got in. I transferred schools a month later. I didn't tell anyone where I went, started over. But last Christmas, I got a card in the mail. No return address, no signature. Just 3 words, "Still in love." I hadn't posted anything online, hadn't spoken to anyone from my old campus, but she still found me. I never told my wife. She doesn't know that I sleep with my phone recording every night, that I check the locks 3 times before bed, that I never park in the same spot twice. But some mornings, I find things moved, a cup I didn't touch, a curtain slightly open. And sometimes, when it's really quiet, I swear I hear my name whispered from outside the bedroom window.
Story 3. The door wasn't locked. Jordan wasn't the worst guy I'd ever dated, but he was the scariest. Not in the beginning, though. When we first met, he was charming, intense in a way that made you feel like the center of the universe. He opened doors, brought me coffee, remembered every tiny detail. It felt like safety. But intensity like his always comes with a price. And it didn't take long for his intensity to become obsession. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was coming out of a breakup and he made me feel wanted again. Special. Seen. We talked until 4 a.m. that night. He texted me as I was walking to my car. "Wish you didn't have to leave." I smiled. At first it felt nice. But looking back, it was the first sign he didn't know how to let go. 3 months in, he had keys to my apartment. I didn't remember giving them to him. I think he took them off my keychain when I was asleep. He started showing up unannounced. Sometimes with food, sometimes just to make sure I was okay. I ignored the unease. I wanted it to work. I was tired of failed relationships, but the red flags became impossible to ignore. If I took too long to answer a text, he'd call. If I didn't pick up, he'd come over. Once I was sick in bed and didn't feel like talking. He banged on my door for 20 minutes straight until I let him in. Then he cried and said he thought I was dead. I started feeling more like a hostage than a girlfriend. When I told him I needed space, he said, "If you leave, I'll lose everything. I'll hurt myself." That was his go-to line. Guilt was his currency. The final break happened after a horrible fight. I told him it was over. He begged, screamed, cried on the floor, said no one would love him like I did. I walked away trembling. I blocked his number, changed my locks, and warned my building manager not to let him in. I thought it was over. A week passed. Then one night, I came home from work and saw my bedroom light on. I live alone. I always turn off the lights. I unlocked the door slowly and walked in with my heart pounding. Everything looked untouched. But when I went to my bedroom, the window was slightly open. I never open it. I checked the closet. Nothing. But my pillow had a distinct dent, like someone had been lying on it. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I forgot. Maybe it was nothing. But the next night I heard footsteps. Above me. I lived on the top floor. There were no neighbors above me, just the attic. I stood still, straining to hear. Then I heard a soft creak, like someone shifting their weight. I grabbed a broomstick and pulled the attic ladder down. Nothing. But in the dust on the floorboards, I saw prints. Bare feet. I didn't sleep that night. I shoved my dresser in front of the door and sat up all night with my phone in one hand and a knife in the other. I called the police in the morning. They checked the attic. No one. They said maybe a squatter, but I knew better. They asked if I had an ex who might be stalking me. I told them everything. They made a report, but without evidence or a direct threat, there was little they could do. A few nights later, I woke to music playing. It was my speaker, connected to my phone, which was turned off. The song, a playlist Jordan made me in our first month together. It wasn't saved on my account anymore. My hands were shaking as I turned it off. I went to the front door, and it was unlocked. I know I locked it. I always lock it. I bolted every lock, pushed the couch in front of it, and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I found a sticky note on the mirror. "You forgot this." It was in his handwriting. I checked the apartment. Every window was locked. The chain was still on the door. There were no signs of forced entry, but someone had been inside. Someone who knew exactly how to move without making a sound. Someone who still had a key. I moved out 2 days later, got rid of everything I owned. New city, new job. Didn't tell anyone from my past where I went. I thought I'd finally escaped. But a few weeks ago I got an email, no subject, just an audio clip. It was me, brushing my teeth, humming. You could hear the running water, the hum of the bathroom fan. It had been recorded from the hallway just outside the door. I live in a secure building now. Cameras, doormen, triple locks. I haven't seen him, haven't heard his voice, but I know he's watching. I know because sometimes I wake up and my door is unlocked again, even when I swear I locked it. And every time I try to tell myself it's just stress, I remember what he used to say. "I'll always be a part of you, whether you want me to or not."
Have you ever broken up with someone and felt relief? Like your lungs could finally breathe after months of suffocating? That's how I felt after I ended things with my ex, Jason. At first, he was charming, a little intense, but I liked that. He'd text me cute memes, show up with coffee, say he couldn't stop thinking about me. But as the months went on, the constant need for attention turned into obsession. He tracked my location on SnapMap, questioned me when I didn't respond in 5 minutes, and once even showed up outside my work after I said I was too busy to meet. So, I cut it off, blocked his number, deleted him from everything. I thought that would be the end of it. I moved apartments a few weeks later, not because of Jason, but because I had found a cheaper place closer to work. Only a handful of people had the new address. I didn't even post it online. For the first time in months, I felt like I could relax. No more late-night arguments, no passive-aggressive texts. Just quiet. But that quiet shattered the night I found a note under my windshield. It was just 3 words, scrawled in red ink. "Nice new place." I froze in the parking lot, heart thudding. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew it was Jason. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else wrote it. Maybe it was a joke. I even laughed nervously to myself as I walked back to my apartment. But when I checked my door, there was another note taped to it. Same handwriting. This time it said, "You can't block real life." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the lights off and a kitchen knife in my lap, every creak of the building making my nerves twitch. I hadn't spoken to Jason in over a month. He shouldn't have known where I lived. I called the police the next day. They told me, unless he physically harmed me or trespassed, there wasn't much they could do. I started changing my routine, parked in different spots, took different routes home. But the notes didn't stop. Every couple of days, I'd find another one. Sometimes in my mailbox, sometimes slipped under my door. Still waiting. You're so much prettier when you're scared. And once just a single printed photo, me from behind, unlocking my door. That was the moment I knew I was being watched. I bought blackout curtains and set up an old baby monitor app to act as a motion detector on my windows. I even asked my landlord if the building had cameras. It didn't. But the worst part? I had no proof it was Jason. He was still blocked on everything. For all I knew, he was watching every move I made without saying a word. Things escalated about 2 weeks later. I got home one evening and noticed my welcome mat was missing. Odd, but not horrifying. I shrugged it off. But when I stepped inside and turned on the hallway light, I saw a single footprint on the wood floor. Muddy. A man's shoe. Big. My apartment was small and always locked. No sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen, but someone had been inside. I could feel it. I started hyperventilating and called the police again. This time, they came out and filed a report, but without signs of a break-in. They said it could have been my imagination. They suggested I get a security camera. I ordered one that same night. The camera arrived 2 days later. I set it up in my living room, facing the front door. It had motion detection and a live feed to my phone. That night, I kept it open on my nightstand while I tried to sleep. Around 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. My heart stopped. I opened the app. Nothing, just the dark room, still and quiet. Maybe a glitch. I tried to go back to sleep. But 10 minutes later, another ping. Motion detected. I opened it again, and this time I saw movement. A shadow. Tall. Just outside the window. I couldn't make out the face, but the way it stood there. Just staring. It was him. I knew it. Jason had found a way to watch me through the cracks in the curtain. I screamed and called 911. The police arrived 10 minutes later, but the figure was gone. I showed them the footage, but it was too blurry to identify. They told me again they couldn't do anything unless I caught him on my property. I begged them for advice, and one officer suggested I file for a restraining order, but I needed proof that it was Jason. I didn't even have his current address. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I unblocked him. Within minutes, I got a message. Took you long enough. I missed your face. I didn't respond. I took screenshots and sent them to the police. I started the restraining order process the next day, but Jason must have sensed something changed because his messages turned darker. If I can't have you, no one can. You look good in red. Should I bring paint? I blocked him again. The fear had become paralyzing. I stopped going out. Called in sick to work. Had groceries delivered and barely opened the door. Every knock made me jump. I even heard tapping on my window at 2 a.m. one night, but when I opened the camera feed, nothing was there. Or maybe he had already backed away into the shadows. My life had become a prison, except the bars were fear, and the warden knew my every move. Then came the final night. I had dozed off on the couch with the TV on low. Around 1:00 a.m., I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. The window. I grabbed the knife from under the coffee table and ran into the hallway. He was inside, Jason. Pale, eyes wide, holding something I couldn't see in his left hand. I screamed and lunged, adrenaline taking over. The knife hit his shoulder. He screamed in rage and stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. I ran into my bedroom, locked the door, and called 911, hyperventilating as I pushed my dresser in front of the door. I could hear him banging, screaming, trying to break in. The police arrived just in time. Jason was arrested, blood dripping down his arm. He had broken the window with a crowbar, which they found next to my couch. The notes, the break-in, the photos, it was all him. He had even stolen a set of keys from my old place and guessed I'd moved somewhere nearby. He's in jail now, serving time for breaking and entering, stalking, and attempted assault. But even now, months later, I still sleep with a knife. I still flinch at footsteps in hallways. And I still wonder how many times he was watching, without me even knowing. Have you ever stayed in a house that just felt wrong? I mean the kind where the air feels heavier in certain rooms, and you find yourself locking doors for no reason. That's what happened to me last summer at a beach house rental in Ocean Point, Maine. I still don't have an explanation for everything, and part of me thinks I never will. But if you ever see a house listing with the words, Ocean View Retreat, Rustic Charm, avoid it. That's all I'll say. It was supposed to be a reunion trip. 4 of us from college, me, my girlfriend Sarah, and our friends Daniel and Morgan, decided to split the cost of a remote beach house for a week. We wanted something quiet, with no neighbors, close enough to walk to the shore, and this place fit the bill. A wraparound porch, huge windows, a private path to the beach. But from the moment we pulled into the long dirt driveway and saw the gray peeling paint and dead trees surrounding it, I felt this weird pressure behind my eyes, like a migraine was coming on. Inside, the house had a musty, old book smell. It wasn't dirty, just untouched. The furniture was stiff and antique. There were heavy curtains on all the windows, and none of the clocks worked. The weirdest thing, though, was the door at the end of the upstairs hallway. It was painted black and had an old-fashioned keyhole but no knob. A brass plate was nailed across it with the words, "Do not enter." At first, we joked about it. "Maybe that's where they hide the bodies," Daniel said, laughing. Sarah didn't laugh. She said it gave her a headache just standing near it. We shrugged it off and chose our rooms. I made a note to ask the host about it, but the cell reception was terrible, and the house didn't have Wi-Fi. Isolation was part of the charm, right? The first night was uneventful, but I kept waking up to what I thought was someone walking down the upstairs hallway. Heavy, slow steps. I assumed it was Daniel getting up to use the bathroom. The next morning, he swore he never left his room. Morgan said the same. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I let it go. But I did notice something strange. There was sand on the hallway floor, just a small trail of it, leading from the direction of the black door. By the third night, things escalated. Sarah woke me up around 2 a.m., whispering that someone was outside our door. We listened, soft breathing. Right on the other side. I got up, flung the door open and found nothing. No one. But the hallway was ice cold, and that trail of sand was there again. Only this time, it looked like bare footprints, as if someone had walked in from the beach. But only halfway. They stopped a few feet from our door, then vanished. I tried the locked door the next morning, tapped on it, pressed my ear to it. Nothing. But I had this overwhelming urge to open it, like it was calling to me. I even looked for a screwdriver in the kitchen to pry it off the hinges. I stopped myself when I caught my reflection in the window, sweaty, pale, eyes wide. I looked sick. That night, all four of us heard it. A loud banging from behind the black door. It sounded like fists slamming against the wood, frantic, panicked. Sarah screamed. We all rushed to the hallway, and as we stood in the dark, frozen, the banging just stopped. Daniel shone his phone flashlight at the floor and gasped. There were wet footprints now. Not sandy wet, as if someone had walked in straight from the ocean. They led from the door, down the stairs, and vanished by the back entrance. The next day, Morgan wanted to leave. She was pale and shaking, and said she saw something through the attic window, a figure standing alone on the shore, just staring at the house. But the house was on a cliff. No path led directly from the beach up that side. It didn't make sense. We tried to call the host again, but still no signal. Even GPS wouldn't load. Daniel tried driving into town, but the road we came in on was blocked by a huge fallen tree. On the fifth night, I woke up to water dripping. The carpet by our bed was soaked. I followed the trail water leading out into the hall again toward the black door, and this time it was open. Just slightly ajar, enough to see darkness beyond it. I don't know what came over me, but I started walking toward it. I didn't hear Sarah behind me. I didn't hear anything at all. I just kept walking. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into what looked like a cellar. But the smell, it was salt water and rot. I don't remember what I saw at the bottom. My mind won't let me recall it. Just eyes, I think. And something standing in ankle-deep seawater. Something that wasn't human. Daniel found me at the top of the stairs, sitting on the floor, whispering something over and over. Sarah said. I kept repeating, "The tide's not in yet." We left that morning, packed in an hour, and drove the long way around through a service road Daniel found on a paper map. None of us spoke the whole drive home. A week later, I looked up the house online. The listing was gone. But in an archived forum thread, I found someone who'd stayed there in 2014. They mentioned the same locked door and hearing water in the walls at night. The thread ended with their last post. I saw him last night, standing at the top of the stairs. I think the tide's coming in. Whatever's behind that door, it's not finished. And if you hear footsteps in the night while staying in some remote beach rental, don't open the door. Have you ever been somewhere so quiet, so isolated, that you started to hear things you were sure couldn't be real? That's what happened to me last summer at a beach house rental in Maine. I'm not talking about spooky sounds or creaky floors. I mean voices, footsteps, and eventually, something worse. It started when my girlfriend Jenna and I decided to take a week off work to get away from the city. She found this vintage beach house on a secluded stretch of coast, the kind of place with creaky wooden floors, salt-stained windows, and no Wi-Fi. It was beautiful in a rustic way, and just remote enough that we could hear the waves crashing from the bedroom. On the first day, everything was perfect. We swam, we barbecued, we watched the stars. But that night, as we settled into bed, I noticed a door in the hallway that was locked. Not just closed, locked with a thick, rusted padlock. I didn't think much of it. Old houses have locked closets all the time. Maybe it was just storage. But the next morning, I woke up to find that door slightly open. The padlock was hanging from the knob, still shut, but the door was cracked maybe 3 inches. Jenna swore she hadn't touched it. I figured maybe it wasn't shut tight the day before. I closed it, double-checked the lock, and went on with our day. That night is when things got weird. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of movement in the hallway. Not creaking, not wind, actual movement, like someone walking slowly, deliberately. I sat up and listened. The sound stopped, then a whisper. Low, breathy, and unintelligible, like someone murmuring through the wall. Jenna stirred beside me and asked if I was okay. I told her it was probably just the house settling, or maybe waves playing tricks on our ears. But I didn't believe it, and when I went to check the hallway again, the locked door was wide open. I grabbed the nearest flashlight and shined it inside. It was a storage room, dusty shelves, stacked boxes, an old mirror leaning against the wall, but on the floor was a pile of clothing, children's clothing, folded, clean, fresh, like someone had been there recently. I slammed the door shut and relocked it, now more shaken than I wanted to admit. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Jenna said she'd heard a child's laugh around 4 a.m., but there were no neighbors for half a mile. No kids for miles, period. We were planning to leave a day early, but that night sealed it. At 3:17 a.m., we both woke up to our bedroom door opening slowly, creaking louder than anything I'd ever heard. I sat up, expecting to see someone, a burglar, maybe, but the hallway was pitch black. Then I saw it. A small shape standing in the darkness, just standing. I turned on the lamp beside the bed. In that split second of light, there was nothing there. But the locked door, again, open. And this time, the clothing on the floor was gone. We packed in a frenzy and left before the sun was up. On our way out, I noticed something carved into the doorframe of that room, something I'd missed before. It said, "Don't let her out." I never told the rental company what happened. I didn't want them thinking I was crazy. But I did look up the house later and found that in 1984, a little girl had vanished from that very property. Her body was never found, just her clothes, folded neatly in the attic. Story 3. The Guest. Have you ever stayed in a house that feels like someone else is still living there? I don't mean roommates or renters, I mean someone who shouldn't be there at all. Someone you never see, but you know they're watching. That's what happened to me when I stayed at my uncle's beach house in Delaware last July. It was supposed to be a relaxing solo getaway. My uncle had just passed, and the house was in probate, so no one had lived in it for over a year. He always kept the place in good shape, and since I was grieving and burned out from work, my aunt said I could use it for a week. I got there around noon, unpacked, and settled in. But the minute I stepped inside, it felt like walking into a room mid-conversation, like someone had just been there. The weirdest part? There was a single wine glass on the counter, still damp, not dusty, not forgotten, like someone had rinsed it, maybe an hour earlier. I brushed it off as my aunt may be coming by and forgetting to mention it, but I still checked every room. All were empty, nothing out of place. That night, I kept hearing light footsteps upstairs. I was sleeping on the first floor, but I swear I could hear soft pacing. At first I assumed it was just the old house settling, but then I remembered. The upstairs hallway is carpeted. You don't hear footsteps on carpet like that. Not distinct ones. On the second night, I found something that made my blood run cold, an open jar of peanut butter on the kitchen table. The spoon was still stuck in it. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even opened the pantry. I called my aunt immediately, thinking maybe she came by with one of her kids and forgot something. She swore she hadn't been there in over a year. I checked the locks, the windows, everything. Nothing was broken or unlocked. Still, I barely slept that night, clutching a fireplace poker in bed. Every creak or shift of the wind felt like a breath on the back of my neck. The next morning, the peanut butter was gone. Not thrown away, not back in the pantry. Gone. Spoon and all. That's when I realized this wasn't a prank. I was sharing this house with someone. Someone who didn't want to be seen. On the fourth night, I set up a camera using my laptop, pointed at the kitchen. I turned off all the lights, left a glass of water on the table, and pretended to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard the faintest clink, glass touching glass. I stayed frozen in bed until morning. When I checked the footage the next day, my stomach dropped. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the water glass slid 2 inches to the left. No footsteps, no figure, just movement. Then, something worse. A dark smudge like a blurry, semi-transparent figure passed in front of the camera for 1 frame, not even a full second. I paused the video, zoomed in. The smudge looked vaguely like a person, tall, hunched, thin. But where the face should be, it was just blank. Like someone had erased it. I left that day, didn't even pack. Just drove 3 hours back to my apartment. The next week, I got a call from my aunt. She sounded shaken. She'd gone to the house with a realtor. They were planning to sell it. But when they walked in, all the food in the pantry was gone. And on the kitchen table was the wine glass and the spoon. The realtor told her something strange too. The neighbors used to complain about my uncle renting the house to a strange man who never spoke and never left the house. But my uncle never rented it, never even put it on Airbnb. And no one could ever prove anyone had been there. They sold the house 3 weeks later. I never went back. But sometimes late at night I swear I hear those soft carpeted footsteps pacing above me. Have you ever walked out onto a beach during low tide and felt like you were trespassing? Like the ocean had pulled back just enough to expose something it didn't want you to see? That's exactly how it felt the day I found the trapdoor under the sand. This happened last summer when my girlfriend and I rented a beachfront cottage in Maine. It was small, quiet, and cheap. Too cheap, really. But the listing said it was a last-minute cancellation, and we were desperate for a break. The place sat right on the edge of the water. When the tide came in, the waves kissed the front steps. When it went out, it revealed a wide, smooth stretch of sand, pockmarked with old rocks and seaweed. On our third night, I went for a solo walk around 2 a.m. The moon was bright, and the beach was empty, no wind, no sound, just the soft crunch of sand under my feet. That's when I noticed a rectangle near the bluff, about 5 feet long and 3 feet wide. It wasn't natural. The outline was too perfect. I brushed away some of the sand and realized it was a wooden door, old and rotting, with a rusted iron handle sunk deep into the grain. No hinges, no sign it had been used in years. But when I pulled on it, it creaked open like it had just been oiled. Inside was a set of stone stairs descending into pitch black. Now, any sane person would have closed the thing and walked away. But I'm not that smart when curiosity takes over. I used my phone's flashlight and started down the steps. Maybe 10 feet down, I found a tunnel damp, carved from rock, and just tall enough to crouch in. It smelled like salt and old wood. At the end of the tunnel was a room. Not big, just a circle carved into the rock with wooden beams propping up the ceiling. And in the center was something that made me freeze. A chair. Just a single wooden chair. Facing the wall, with rope tied neatly at its legs and arms, and next to it, a bucket full of teeth. I swear I stopped breathing. Human teeth. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, some bloody, some small like they belonged to a child. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, and that's when I noticed something else, tally marks. Hundreds of them, carved into the rock, circling the entire chamber like someone had been counting days, victims. I bolted out of the tunnel, slammed the door shut, and ran back to the cottage. I didn't sleep, just sat at the kitchen table until the sun rose, heart pounding. I told my girlfriend everything. She didn't believe me until we went back that afternoon during low tide. But the door was gone, covered. Like the ocean had pulled the sand right back over it. I dug for over an hour, nothing. No outline, no handle, just smooth, wet sand. I even came back the next night at the exact same time. Still nothing. It was like the tide had swallowed the whole thing. The rest of our stay was tense. I kept hearing weird sounds at night, like distant humming or dragging. Once, I swear I saw someone standing on the beach at 3 a.m. just watching the house. But when I blinked, they were gone. After we left, I tried researching the area. Turns out, there were rumors, old fisherman tales about smugglers using underground tunnels beneath the shore back in the 1800s. But one story stuck out. A local man in the 1960s who disappeared for weeks, then reappeared mute and shaking. He claimed he was taken at low tide by the man with the bucket of teeth. I don't know if what I found was part of that legend or something worse. All I know is, I'll never walk on a beach at night again, especially not during low tide. Have you ever rented a beach house and felt like someone else was still living there? Like no matter how many windows you opened, the place still held its breath? That's how it felt when my friends and I stayed at this rental near Outer Banks, North Carolina. There were 4 of us, me, Eric, Jenna, and Chris, just out of college and ready for a week of sun, drinks, and dumb beach memories. The house was an old 2-story cottage perched right on a private strip of sand. Perfect views, faded nautical decor, and a weird smell like seaweed and mothballs. But we didn't care. We'd paid for it in full and weren't about to waste a second. On the first day, we noticed something strange. A locked room at the back of the house. Solid oak door, padlocked shut, with a "Do Not Enter Owner's Storage" sign nailed above it. Weird, but we figured it was where the owners kept personal stuff. Still, Chris tried the handle more than once. Just to see, he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. The waves were louder than they should have been with the windows closed. I also kept hearing something creaking. At first, I thought it was just the old house settling, but it was rhythmic like footsteps upstairs. Problem was, we were all on the 2nd floor. And the locked room? It was directly beneath us. The next morning, I brought it up. Eric joked that the owner was probably sleeping in there. Jenna didn't laugh. I had a dream, she said, that someone was whispering under the floor. Chris went downstairs and knocked on the door. No response. So he left a beer can on the floor outside it like a prank. It was gone the next time we checked. On the 3rd night, Jenna woke us up screaming. She swore she saw someone standing in the hallway. A man. Tall, wet-looking, just standing still and breathing. Chris said she probably dreamed it. I wasn't so sure. I'd heard something too. A faint, dragging sound across the floor. We decided to leave the house the next morning and hang out in town. When we came back that night, the front door was unlocked. None of us had done it. Inside, nothing was missing, but something was off. Our beach towels were moved. A wet footprint led from the back door into the hallway and stopped in front of the locked unit. We called the rental agency. They brushed it off, saying it was probably the cleaning crew. At 2 a.m., and besides, that footprint wasn't from one of us. It was huge, way bigger than any of ours. I measured it with my hand. The toes were oddly long, deformed. That night, we pushed the living room couch against the locked door. Chris even wedged a chair under the handle. We tried to laugh it off. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sharp bang. The chair had been knocked over. The couch had moved a few inches. And the lock? Still on, but now slightly twisted, like someone had been yanking on it from the other side. Eric had enough. He wanted to leave. But the next morning, our car batteries were dead. All 3 vehicles. We hadn't even parked close to the ocean, so salt spray wasn't the cause. It was like someone had drained them. The final night, we all slept in the same room upstairs with the door locked. Around 4:30 a.m., I heard whispering through the floor. Not voices, just one deep voice, repeating something over and over, like a chant. When I pressed my ear to the wood, it stopped. Then, a knock. From below. We left the next morning. We didn't even pack right, just threw bags in the trunks and took off once someone jumped us with cables. I never went back, but a month later I found a post about that house. A Reddit thread called Cursed Beach Rentals. Someone posted a photo of the exact same house and said, "If you find a padlocked room at the back, do not stay." My cousin disappeared from there in 1997. Story 1. The woods behind our cabin. Have you ever heard someone whisper your name when no one was around? Not in a horror movie sense, no creepy soundtrack, no jump scare, just silence, and then your name, almost too soft to notice. That happened to me the summer before I turned 18. I still can't explain it. I don't talk about it much anymore, but I'll tell you what happened. Because even now, years later, I still don't sleep with the windows open. My family owns a small lake cabin in northern Michigan. It's been in the family for years, a basic wooden structure with no internet, no cell service, and barely any electricity. It's surrounded by thick forest on all sides except the front, which faces the lake. We went there every summer for 2 weeks, just to disconnect. It was peaceful, even boring. Until that year, in 2018, it was just me, my cousin Logan, and my Uncle Dave. Logan was my age, and we'd grown up going to the cabin together. That summer, we were given more freedom. We'd take the canoe out late at night, build fires, explore deeper into the woods than we were usually allowed. It was supposed to be a rite of passage before senior year. One night, Logan came up with the idea to camp out in the woods behind the cabin. Not just near the edge, he meant deep in, past the point where the trees thinned and it got dark even in the day. My uncle wasn't thrilled, but he trusted us. We packed flashlights, sleeping bags, trail mix, and 2 walkie-talkies, no tents. We thought that made it more legit. We hiked out around 7 p.m. By 8:30, we'd found a flat patch surrounded by pines and set up camp. The air was still, and the temperature dropped fast. I remember how silent everything was. No crickets, no birds, just the occasional rustle of wind. By 10 p.m., the fire we built had mostly died down, and we lay on our backs watching the trees sway above us. That's when I heard it. It was a whisper, faint, barely audible. "Jared." I sat up. Logan was already looking at me. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "It said your name." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was Uncle Dave on the walkie. We both grabbed our radios. They were on. No static. No clicks. "Uncle Dave, you there?" I said. Silence. "Probably nothing," Logan mumbled. But his voice didn't sound convinced. Around midnight, we were still awake, just staring into the dying fire. That's when the second whisper came, this time louder. "Jared, come here." It sounded like a woman's voice. Soft. Gentle. Almost like someone singing under their breath. Logan's face drained of color. "Nope," he said. "Nope, I'm not doing this. Let's go back." I wanted to agree, but something stopped me. Not bravery, more like curiosity. Or stupidity. I told him to wait. I stood and shined my flashlight toward where the voice had come from. Trees. Nothing but dark, unmoving trees. Then something moved. Not an animal. Not a person. It was like the trees themselves shifted, or like something big passed behind them. The light caught a glimpse of something pale. That's when the walkie-talkie crackled. "Boys? You there?" It was Uncle Dave. His voice sounded panicked. "I just saw someone near the cabin," he said. "Thought it was one of you. But they ran into the woods." Logan and I looked at each other. Neither of us had left the clearing. "We're still out here," I said. Long pause. Then, "Get back now." We didn't argue. We packed up fast. Logan kept his flashlight aimed behind us as we walked. Every few seconds, I swore I heard twigs snap just beyond the light's reach. Halfway back, the whisper came again, but this time, it was right behind us. "Jared." I spun around. No one. But Logan screamed. I turned to see him staring up into the trees. "Did you see that?" he said, breathless. Something was in the tree. We ran, tripped, fell, kept running. When we got back to the cabin, Uncle Dave was waiting on the porch with a hunting rifle. He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "I saw her," he whispered. She was standing by the shed. I thought it was a neighbor. But when I called out, she ran. Fast, not like a person should be able to. We locked all the doors. None of us slept. The next day, we packed up early. On the drive back to the city, Logan didn't speak once. It's been years. I've looked into urban legends, forest spirits, missing persons. I found nothing that matches. Except once, on a Reddit thread, I saw someone mention the Whisper Woman. A figure people hear calling them in the woods. Always at night, always by name. I didn't reply, but I've never gone back to that cabin, because sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I still hear her. Story 2. The Drive. An Incident. The summer after I graduated high school, I worked part-time at an old-fashioned drive. In theater in rural Tennessee. It was the kind of place that still used analog projectors and sold popcorn out of a trailer that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Most nights were uneventful families, couples, small groups of teenagers drinking warm beer in pickup trucks. But that one Saturday night in late July changed everything. We were screening a double feature, a new horror film followed by a classic slasher. The place was packed. I was on cleanup duty with my coworker Rachel, and we had a good system. We'd wait until the second film started, then make rounds to pick up trash without bothering the guests. Around 10:30, the first movie ended, and we took a breather before heading out with garbage bags and flashlights. It was a clear night, warm with just the faintest breeze. The parking field was pitch black between the screen and the concession stand, lit only by the screen's glow and a few flickering overhead lamps. We were maybe halfway through the lot when I noticed something strange. A car parked way in the back, way past where we let people set up. It was an old blue sedan, rusty, with no visible occupants. "Was that there earlier?" I asked Rachel. She shook her head. "I don't think so. It's way out of the zone." I told her to keep going while I checked it out. As I got closer, I noticed the windows were rolled up, but the engine was off. The car looked abandoned, but I still called out, "Hello, drive, in's up there. You're not supposed to park this far out." No response. I got closer, maybe 5 feet away, and shined my flashlight inside. The back seat was empty. But in the front passenger seat, there was a mannequin. At least, that's what I thought at first. It was wearing a faded floral dress, head turned away. It looked plastic, unnaturally still. Pale. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about it just felt off. Then it turned its head. I jumped back so fast, I dropped the flashlight. It didn't make any noise, didn't move otherwise, just rotated its head slowly and looked at me. Its eyes didn't reflect the light like human eyes should. I backed away and nearly ran into Rachel, who had come back to check on me. "What the hell?" she whispered. "Someone's in there," I whispered back. "But I don't think they're right." Rachel wanted to call the manager. But our radios weren't working. The signal always cut out in the back field. We decided to walk to the front, fast. But as we turned around, we heard a car door slam. We spun around. The passenger side door was now wide open, and the figure, mannequin or not, was gone. I swept the lot with my flashlight. Nothing. Then Rachel gasped and pointed. There, near the tree line behind the field, we saw the figure again. It was standing perfectly still between two trees, just watching. We didn't wait around. We ran back to the concession trailer and told our manager, Eric. He laughed at first until he saw we weren't kidding. He grabbed his flashlight and came with us. When we got back to the car, it was gone. No tracks, no sound, just empty grass where it had been parked. Eric searched the perimeter with his own light, even went into the woods a few steps, but found nothing. He told us it was probably some crackhead or weirdo trying to scare us. But here's the thing. The next night, we were doing inventory around midnight. The drive-in was closed, no guests, just a skeleton crew locking up. Rachel screamed from the projection booth. I ran up the stairs, and when I got there, she was staring out the window. The same blue sedan was parked in the backfield again, empty. We never saw anyone leave it, never saw it arrive. We didn't go check it out this time. We called the sheriff's department, and they sent a deputy, but by the time he arrived, the car was gone again. I quit a week later. Rachel left the same day I did. 3 months later, I got a text from her in the middle of the night. All it said was, it was parked outside my apartment. She moved the next week. I haven't spoken to her since. Every summer, I still check the news for stories about that car. I've never found anything, but sometimes I dream about it. That figure, the slow turn of its head, and those eyes that didn't blink, didn't shine, didn't look human. And I wonder where it'll show up next. Story 3. The Lake Cabin Stranger. It was the summer of 2019 when I spent a weekend alone at my grandparents' lake cabin. I'd just turned 21, and they offered it to me as a sort of peaceful birthday getaway. No work, no noise, just time to decompress. The cabin was in upstate New York, on a quiet lake with maybe 3 other houses scattered along the shoreline. Most of them were seasonal and empty that early in June. The first night was perfect. I grilled some food, listened to music, took a swim in the warm lake water, and fell asleep in the hammock on the back deck. No one around for miles. It felt like paradise. The second night, that's when it changed. I'd spent the day hiking and swimming again. By sunset, I was beat. I ate leftovers, showered, and curled up on the couch to read. Around 10 p.m., I shut off the lights and went to bed, all the windows open to let in the summer breeze. I woke up at 7 a.m., not because of a nightmare or because I was uncomfortable, but because someone was knocking on the front door. Soft, deliberate knocking. I froze. My first thought was that maybe one of the neighbors needed help, but then I remembered those other houses were empty. I hadn't seen a soul in 2 days. I stayed still for a few seconds, trying to listen. The knocking came again. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and moved toward the hallway. The front door had a small window, but from where I was standing, I couldn't see anything. I thought about calling the police, but there was no signal out there, and no landline in the cabin. I tiptoed to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. Then, I slowly crept to the front window, staying low. I peeked through the curtain. There was a man standing on the porch. He wasn't trying to hide. He was just standing there, arms at his sides, facing the door. Not moving. Wearing dark jeans, a pale t-shirt, and no shoes. No shoes. I ducked back, heart slamming in my chest. I waited, didn't breathe. Then the knocking started again. But this time, it was coming from the back door. I nearly screamed. I rushed to the kitchen and locked it, then ran through the house and locked every window and door I could. The knocks moved from door to window like he was circling the house. And then, silence. Nothing for at least 10 minutes. I didn't dare move. I crouched in the bathroom with the knife, back against the wall, trying to calm my breathing. Then I heard it, the creak of the front door opening. I was sure I had locked it. I remember locking it. I heard slow, deliberate footsteps on the wood floor, one after another. I held my breath. The sound stopped outside the bathroom. I clutched the knife, ready to stab at anything that moved. Then, a knock. From inside the house. On the bathroom door. Not loud, not urgent. Just that same soft, deliberate rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I almost blacked out from fear. Then I remembered something. The bathroom had a small window above the sink, too small for most people to fit through, but I didn't have a choice. I climbed onto the counter, pushed the window open, and wriggled out. I scraped my back and nearly broke my wrist landing on the gravel, but I was out. I sprinted barefoot to the edge of the woods and crouched in the dark, staring at the cabin. The front door was wide open, the lights were on, and a figure stood in the doorway, looking around slowly, like it was trying to decide where I'd gone. I stayed hidden until the sun came up. Then I ran into town 5 miles barefoot and called the police from a diner. When they got to the cabin, there was no one there. Nothing stolen, no signs of forced entry. All the windows were closed again, all the doors locked, except the bathroom door. That one was wide open. They never found the man. No footprints, no tire marks, nothing. But later that summer, I found something behind the cabin. Under the porch, tucked into a dry corner, was a pair of worn, dirty shoes, men's size 12. I never went back. My grandparents sold the cabin that fall. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd opened that door, or waited just a few minutes longer. Sometimes I still hear that knock in my dreams. 3 soft taps. Pause. 3 more, and I always wake up at 7 a.m. I've been on the road for over a decade now, and if there's one superstition I've always brushed off, it's the stories about black dogs' omens of death, they say. I never believed in that stuff. Until one cold February night outside Roanoke. I was hauling freight southbound on I-81, maybe around 2:30 a.m. Not another soul on the road. Just me, the humming of my tires, and a light fog creeping across the asphalt. I had just passed exit 9 when I saw something in my headlights. It looked like a large dog, black as night, built like a mastiff, with glowing eyes that shimmered like oil slicks. It was standing dead center in the road. I had no time to swerve. I braced for impact, but there was no thud, no bump, no resistance. I slammed the brakes, came to a hard stop, and jumped out of the cab, flashlight in hand. The road was empty. I searched both ditches, walked back 100 feet, scanned the tree line. Nothing. Not even footprints in the dew-covered grass. I chalked it up to exhaustion and climbed back in. 10 minutes later, my CB crackled. A voice came through, raspy, distant.
You saw him, didn't you?
I froze. Who is this? I asked. Static, then silence. I kept driving, more alert than ever. I didn't see the dog again, but when I pulled into a truck stop an hour later, an old-timer approached me, said he recognized my rig.
You were stopped at exit 9?
I nodded. Yeah, some kind of animal ran out. He raised a hand to stop me.
Black dog, glowing eyes?
I hesitated. Yeah. He looked down at the pavement, then back up at me, his expression grim.
You need to be careful the next few days. That stretch is cursed. A lot of drivers see that thing before something bad happens.
I tried to laugh it off, but something in his eyes made me stop. 3 days later, I lost control on a mountain pass. My brakes failed on a downhill grade. I went into the runaway ramp and barely survived. Broke 3 ribs, dislocated a shoulder, totaled the rig. The mechanics couldn't find anything wrong with the brakes, said the system was fine. As I was sitting in the hospital, replaying it all in my head, I remembered the dog. How it didn't move, how it just stared, how it didn't leave a trace. I started asking around. Other truckers, locals. Turns out the legend's been around for years. They call it the Hellhound of Exit 9. Some say it's the ghost of a dog that was hit and left to die. Others believe it's something much older, a spirit that feeds off wrecks and death. I don't drive that route anymore. If I have to pass through Virginia, I take the long way. Adds 3 hours to the trip, but it's worth it, because I know what I saw. It was about 3:45 a.m. when I pulled into a remote gas station somewhere off Route 95 in Maine. I'd been pushing hard since Connecticut, and my eyes were starting to blur, so I figured I'd top off the tank and grab a coffee. The place was one of those older stations, no brand name, barely lit, one flickering bulb over the pumps. There was only one other vehicle there, an old, beat-up sedan parked at pump 3. No one was inside it. I pulled up to pump 1 and shut off the engine. The night air was biting cold, and a thin fog was creeping across the lot. I stepped out and noticed something right away: the silence. No wind, no bugs, not even the usual buzz of the fluorescent lights. Just dead quiet. As I started fueling, I glanced over at the sedan again. This time, there was a man standing beside it. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was tall, maybe 6'5", but rail thin, skin pale as candle wax, wearing a tattered coat and jeans that looked decades out of date. His head was shaved, and he had these huge, hollow eyes that locked on me the second I noticed him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I felt something twist in my gut. I finished fueling and walked toward the station door to pay. As I opened it, I looked back over my shoulder. The man was now standing next to my rig. I hadn't heard him move. No footsteps. No sound at all. Inside the store, I rang the bell at the counter. No clerk, no music. The coffee machine was cold, lights dimmed. I stood there, calling out, but nothing. I turned around to check the lot again. The man was gone. So was the sedan. I bolted back to the truck, locked the doors, and got the hell out of there. I didn't even realize I'd left without paying until I was halfway down the highway. About an hour later, I pulled into a bigger, better-lit truck stop. I asked the guy behind the counter if he knew the other station, the one off 95 with the old pumps. He gave me a strange look.
That place burned down 2 years ago. Clerk died in the fire. No one's rebuilt it.
I insisted I'd just been there. He shook his head and pulled out his phone, showed me pictures, blackened ruins, graffiti all over the pumps. I felt ice run down my spine. To this day, I don't know what I stepped into that night. A memory? A leftover echo? Or something else entirely? But I know what I saw. A pale man. At pump 3, watching me like he'd been waiting. And I swear I still hear that gas pump click off in the middle of the night, long after I've parked, and I don't need to see it again. I was driving through the back roads of Mississippi, hauling produce on a route I don't normally take, Highway 84, somewhere between Brookhaven and Waynesboro. It was about 2 a.m., and I was the only one on the road. No headlights in either direction for miles. That's when I saw her, a woman in an orange sundress, barefoot, standing at the edge of the woods. She had long dark hair and pale skin that almost glowed in my headlights. Her dress fluttered in the breeze, and her head was tilted like she was trying to hear something. I slowed down, uneasy. I've stopped for people before, broken down drivers, hitchhikers, but something about this felt wrong. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stared at the road like she didn't know what it was. I passed her slowly, eyes on the mirror. She didn't turn to look at me. I radioed it in just in case. Possible pedestrian on 84, maybe needs help, and kept going. About 10 miles down, I saw her again. Same orange dress, same spot on the shoulder, but it couldn't have been. No one on foot could have made it that far ahead of me, not without a car or cutting through the woods. And even then, it would have taken an hour at least. I drove past, faster this time. 10 minutes later, she was there again. Same spot, same tilt of the head. At this point, I was breathing heavy and gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to look. I just wanted off that road. Eventually, I saw lights ahead, a small gas station with a diner attached. I pulled in, parked under the canopy, and rushed inside. The place was empty except for an old woman behind the register.
"You all right, hun?" she asked.
I nodded, then shook my head. There's a woman out there, in a dress. I've passed her 3 times. Same woman.
She didn't look surprised, just said, "Orange?" "She's been around a long time," the woman said. "They say she was hit by a truck decades ago. Driver didn't stop. Folks see her when they're alone, when they're tired. She walks the woods at night, looking for the truck that killed her."
That was enough for me. I grabbed a coffee, sat in the cab for a bit, and tried to gather myself. After an hour, I decided to keep moving, just wanted to get clear of that stretch. 10 miles down the road, my headlights flickered. Then my engine sputtered. I pulled off, cursing, and popped the hood. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow, crunching gravel. I turned, and there she was, closer than before. Head still tilted. Eyes locked on mine. I slammed the hood and floored it, engine coughing to life just in time. I didn't stop until I reached the next town. That was 4 years ago. I haven't taken that route since. I don't plan to, but every now and then, I'll see her in my dreams, standing by the road, barefoot, head tilted, waiting for a ride she'll never get. And I swear, sometimes when I pass tree lines at night, I catch a flash of orange, and I don't look twice. I was hauling animal feed through Kansas, cutting across rural roads near Salina, the kind of empty highway where you see more cornfields than cars, and the towns are just names on signs. It was around 4 a.m., and I was looking for a place to pull over and rest my eyes. That's when I saw the grain elevator. It stood like a monument on the horizon, tall, white, weathered. There was a small gravel lot beside it, big enough to park my rig. I figured I'd stop for a bit, stretch my legs. As I pulled in, my headlights swept across the side of the elevator, and that's when I saw him. A man in overalls and a white t-shirt standing just inside the open doorway. He looked like he belonged there, like a worker. But something was off. He didn't move when the lights hit him, just stood perfectly still, staring at the road. I honked lightly, gave a wave through the windshield. Nothing. No reaction. I parked the rig and stepped out, suddenly not feeling so tired anymore. "Hey," I called. "You all right?" He slowly turned his head, but didn't say anything. Just stared at me. His eyes were deep-set, dark, and expressionless. I remember thinking he looked dry, like paper. His skin had this pale, brittle look, like he'd been sitting out in the sun too long. "Just taking a break," I said, trying to ease the tension. Still nothing. After a moment, he stepped backward into the elevator, out of sight. I walked toward the doorway, peering in cautiously. It was empty. Completely. Just dust, shadows, and a few rusted tools on the ground. No man, nowhere to hide. Just a hollow concrete tube that echoed with every step I took. I backed out, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe he'd slipped past me somehow. I walked back to the truck, climbed into the cab, and decided to move on. As I turned the key, the headlights flicked on again, and this time he was standing at the edge of the cornfield, 20 yards away, facing me. No expression. No motion. Just watching. I didn't wait. I drove straight out of there, back onto the highway, heart pounding. I kept checking the mirrors for miles, expecting to see him pop up again in the dark. Later, I asked a guy at a fuel stop if he knew anything about that old grain elevator. He paused, then nodded slowly.
Used to be a mill there, he said. Back in the 70s, a worker fell into the grain chute. Got buried. They didn't find him for days. Shut the place down after that.
I asked what the guy looked like.
Overalls, pale, still.
That was enough for me. Now, every time I see a grain elevator in the distance, I get that same sick feeling in my gut. And I never ever stop near one at night. Because I don't think he was just watching. I think he was waiting. There's a way station off I-70 in eastern Colorado that most drivers pass without thinking twice. Small brick building, a couple of lanes, barely staffed at night. I used to stop there every trip until one night in 2021. It was just past 2 a.m. when I pulled in. The place was open, but no other rigs were in sight. The light above the scale was on, and the green arrow signaled me to enter. I rolled forward, stopped, and waited for the scale to register. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft, raspy, almost like someone whispering through a fan, too heavy. I glanced at the monitor. It was blank. The voice came again, closer. "He's too heavy." I leaned out the window. What was that? No answer. Just the wind brushing across the plains and the low hum of the scale. Then a knock on my passenger side door. I jumped so hard I hit my head on the ceiling. I whipped around, no one there. I climbed out, walked around the truck with a flashlight. The lot was empty. No cars, no officers, nothing. Just me and the building. I started to head for the office to see if someone was inside playing games, but as I got close, I noticed something strange. The windows were completely black. Not dark, black, like someone had painted over them. Still, I knocked. No answer. I turned the knob and the door creaked open. The interior was pitch dark. despite the overhead lights supposedly being on. I stepped 1 foot inside and instantly felt something was wrong. The air was thick, like I'd walked into a sealed room. It smelled musty, like wet carpet and rusted iron.
That's when I heard it again, whispering, but now it was all around me. He's still here, buried, never got out.
I backed out fast, heart racing, slammed the door, ran to my cab, and drove off the scale without waiting for the green light. I didn't care if I got a fine, I just needed distance. I didn't stop again until I reached Denver. Later that day, I told a buddy what happened. He got real quiet, then pulled up an article on his phone, showed me a news clipping from 1998. Apparently, a dot worker at that way station went missing during his shift. They searched the surrounding fields, the woods, even the drainage ditches. Never found him. A few years later, they redid the floor of the way station, poured new concrete after a collapse in the break room. Some folks believe they buried him without even realizing it. Now drivers report hearing whispers, seeing shadows move behind the glass, feeling watched as they idle on the scale. Some say he's still doing his job, still measuring weight, still trying to tell people something. Me? I don't stop there anymore. And if I ever have to, I keep the windows up, the doors locked, and I don't listen too close because sometimes the whispering sounds like it's coming from right under the tires. I was rolling through Montana on US 287, just north of Helena, around 1 a.m. The sky was pitch black, and the road was completely empty. No towns for miles, just stretches of dark highway and the distant shimmer of mountains. I turned on my CB to keep myself awake. Most channels were quiet. Then I flipped to channel 23 and heard static, then a voice. "Breaker, anyone out there?" It was a woman's voice, quiet, shaky. I replied, "This is Dust Dog on 287. You okay?" Long pause. Then he took the keys. "I'm locked in. I can't get out." I asked her for a location, but all I got was sobbing and static. Something about a blue pickup and being stuck in a rest area. Then silence. I stayed on the channel, trying to coax more information. After a few minutes, a man's voice came on. "She doesn't need your help." Chilled me to the core. I immediately reported it to Highway Patrol. Gave them my coordinates, channel number, everything. They said they'd check it out, but didn't sound too concerned. Then my CB started acting weird, volume spiking, channels switching on their own. I turned it off. 15 minutes later, I saw something up ahead, a blue pickup on the shoulder, emergency lights blinking. The driver's door was open, no one inside. I slowed down but didn't stop, not after what I heard. A few miles later, I reached a truck stop, told the clerk about it, including the voice on the CB. He looked at me like I'd told him a ghost story.
"That channel?" he said. "You heard her on 23? I nodded. He shook his head. "Channel 23's cursed. Been that way since a girl went missing 10 years ago. Last transmission was a plea for help. Said she was locked in a pickup at a rest stop. They never found her." I didn't say anything. He added, "Drivers still report hearing her, always around that stretch of 287, always on 23.
I turned my CB off that night and didn't touch it again for weeks. Some folks say you shouldn't respond when she calls, that she's stuck in a loop. Others say you invite something in when you answer, something that pretends to be her, until it's not. All I know is I won't use that channel anymore. And if I hear that voice again, crying for help, I'll keep the radio off and both eyes on the road. I was on a long, overnight haul through New Mexico, somewhere off I-10 near Lordsburg. I stopped at one of those old travel centers, not a Love's or Flying J, but a real rundown place. Flickering signs, dusty pumps, a half-lit diner attached. It was around 3:30 a.m., and my stomach had been acting up. Figured I'd use the restroom before grabbing a coffee. The place was empty, just one sleepy-looking cashier behind the counter who barely looked up as I walked past. The men's room was at the far end, past some broken slot machines. Inside, it was dead silent. One of the fluorescent lights was flickering, and only 2 of the 3 stalls had doors. I took the far stall and sat down. A couple minutes in, I heard the restroom door creak open. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. They walked to the stall next to mine, the one without a door, and stopped. I expected to see someone's feet, but there were none. I leaned slightly to check again. Still nothing.
Then a whisper, "You shouldn't be here." It came from the empty stall.
I froze. My blood ran cold. "Excuse me?" I said. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks on the divider between the stalls. I stood up fast, heart pounding, yanked my pants up, burst out of the stall, no one there. The restroom was empty. I checked under all the doors, even peeked outside. Nothing. I was alone. Trying to calm myself down, I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror. That's when I saw something behind me. A face. Pale. Sunken eyes. Thin lips. Just for a second, I spun around. No one. I bolted out and went straight to the counter. Told the cashier someone was messing around in the bathroom.
He just stared at me. "You used the back stall, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed. "We tell folks not to. Some listen, most don't." Then he told me the story.
10 years ago, a trucker came through during a snowstorm. He used the bathroom, had a heart attack in the far stall. Wasn't found until the next morning. People say he still lingers. Doesn't like company.
"He talks sometimes," the clerk said, "but mostly he just watches."
Needless to say, I didn't stay for coffee. Now, whenever I stop at unfamiliar truck stops, especially the older ones, I check the restroom stalls before I do anything. And if one doesn't have a door, I don't use it. It was a stretch of highway in Texas I'd driven 100 times before, long, flat, and forgettable. But something about the area around mile marker 212 had always made me uneasy. I didn't know why, just a gut thing. Then one night, that stretch gave me a reason. I was hauling auto parts to San Antonio, cruising through around 3:15 a.m. when I saw a car on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. I slowed down out of instinct. There was a man standing next to the driver's side door, waving me down with one arm. I rolled down my window and called out, "You all right?" He didn't answer, just pointed toward the front of the car, then motioned like he wanted me to stop. I pulled over a few yards ahead, threw on my flashers, and got out. As I approached, I called out again. Still nothing. He just stood there, head down, pointing. But here's the thing. As I got within 20 feet, I realized he wasn't moving at all. His arms stayed outstretched. His fingers didn't twitch. Not even his clothes rippled in the breeze. He looked frozen. I stopped in my tracks. Then I noticed the car. It was spotless, like showroom spotless. No license plates, no dust, no grime, not even a speck on the windshield. That's when I knew something was wrong. I backed away slowly, not turning around until I was at my truck steps. I climbed in and locked the doors. As I pulled back onto the road, I glanced in the mirror. He was gone. So was the car. I was shaken but tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Long hours, stress, whatever. But when I hit the next truck stop, I mentioned it to the guy working the counter. When I said mile marker 212, he gave me a look like I'd just said a curse word.
"You saw the stalled car?" he asked quietly. I nodded.
He told me there had been an accident on that stretch 5 years ago. A man in a black sedan had pulled over, trying to flag down help. A distracted trucker didn't see him and, well, you can imagine. Since then, there had been dozens of sightings. Same car, same man, always pointing, always silent, and always gone by the time anyone got close. Some truckers who stopped said they lost time. One guy said his dashcam footage went static for 20 minutes. Another said he touched the man's shoulder and felt like he was grabbing cold steel. The locals call it the ghost of 212. Highway Patrol won't log it anymore. They just say avoid that mile at night. I drive a different route now. Adds 45 minutes to my haul, but I don't care. Because whatever I saw that night wasn't alive. And if you ever drive down that road and see a man waving near a pristine black car, keep moving. He's not asking for help. He's asking for you. I was parked at a truck stop outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It was late, around 1:30 a.m., and I was dead tired. I had a few hours to kill before I could unload at my next stop, so I figured I'd catch some Chudier in the sleeper. The lot was quiet. A few rigs idling, some guys walking back from the diner, but mostly dark and still. I climbed into the bunk, shut the curtains, and dozed off almost instantly. Maybe an hour later I woke up to the sound of soft knocking, not at the driver's door, not the window. From inside the cab, 3 gentle taps. Then silence. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I listened, nothing. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. I laid back down, then I heard it again, tap, 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 and this time it was followed by a faint whisper. "Are you awake?" I froze. I pulled back the curtain and looked around the cab. Nothing. Checked the lock still sealed, no sign of forced entry. I even checked under the bed and in the side compartments. Empty. Trying to calm myself down, I turned on the dome light, cracked a bottle of water, and sat there a minute. Everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A handprint on the inside of the rear window. Small, smudged, as if someone had leaned there from the inside. I wiped it off and got out of the truck. Did a full walk around, nothing suspicious, just my rig, parked under a flickering floodlight. I debated sleeping again, but decided I'd feel safer in the diner. I grabbed my keys, locked the cab, and started walking.
That's when a man, maybe in his 60s, grizzled, long-haul type, called out to me from his truck 2 spots over. "You hear her too?" he asked, as if he already knew. I stopped. "Hear who?" He nodded at my truck. "The little girl shows up in sleeper cabs. You hear tapping, whispering. Sometimes feel someone crawl into the bunk." He wasn't joking. He told me he first encountered her 15 years ago. Different truck, different state, but the same thing. The knocking, the voice, the handprint. Said he'd met maybe a dozen other drivers over the years who'd had the exact same experience. Always a girl, always the bunk, always asking the same thing. "Are you awake?" I asked who she was. He shook his head. "No one knows. Maybe a runaway, maybe something else, but she doesn't leave a trace, just memory."
I didn't sleep that night. I left the lot early and drove till sunrise. Weeks later, I found a thread online, a forum for truckers sharing strange encounters. A dozen posts titled "Sleeper Cab Girl," all the same story. Some said she appears when you're too tired to drive. Some believe she's a warning. Others think she's just lonely. Me? I still don't know. But every night before I climb into the bunk, I check the back window for smudges. And if I ever hear that knock again, I won't answer. Have you ever stayed in a room that just felt wrong? Like the air was heavier? Like the shadows moved when you weren't looking? That's what cabin 716 was like. I'll never forget it, even if I want to. It was a 7-day Caribbean cruise I took last September, solo. I needed a break from work and life, and figured being out at sea would do the trick. I booked last minute and got a discounted stateroom. The agent paused when he saw the cabin number but didn't say anything, just handed me the keycard with a weird look on his face. Cabin 716 was midship, deck 7, starboard side. When I opened the door, the first thing that hit me was the smell, not foul, just stale, like someone had been in there for a long time without opening a window. But cruise rooms don't even have real windows, just thick portholes. The cabin was freezing, even though the thermostat was set to 72. I tried raising it, but the air stayed icy. Still, I was tired from travel, so I unpacked, took a shower, and laid down. That night, I had the worst sleep of my life. I kept waking up to the sound of what I thought was someone breathing, not heavy, just present, like someone was in the room with me. At one point, I sat up and looked around. The room was dark, but the porthole let in some moonlight. That's when I saw it, a silhouette, standing in the corner near the closet, perfectly still. My heart went into overdrive. I scrambled for the light, and the second it flicked on, it was gone. I told myself it was the towel hanging weird or my imagination playing tricks. But I knew better. The next day, I asked the room steward if anyone had ever complained about the room. He looked up from his cart and said, "You're in 716? I nodded. His face changed.
He leaned in and whispered, "If anything weird happens, just ask to move rooms, don't wait."
Weird? Like what? He looked over his shoulder, lowered his voice even more, and said,
Sometimes people hear knocking from the inside of the closet or see things in the mirror. Some even leave after the first night.
That made my stomach turn. I was planning to stay, maybe chalk it all up to nerves. But the second night was worse. I locked the closet door before bed. I know how stupid that sounds, but it made me feel better. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the distinct sound of the closet door handle jiggling, like someone trying to open it from the inside. I stayed completely still, pretending to be asleep. The sound stopped. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp taps from inside the closet. I bolted out of bed, heart pounding, and turned on every single light. The handle had stopped moving. I slowly approached the closet and unlocked it. Empty. Just my clothes. Nothing else. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I marched to the guest services desk and demanded to be moved. The woman barely looked up when I gave her the room number. She said, "Let me check availability," and within minutes gave me a new room key without question. When I got to my new room, cabin 1122, I passed another crew member in the hallway and casually said, "Guess I wasn't the first to switch out of 716.
He gave me a sidelong glance and replied, "You'd be surprised how many people don't make it past night 2. I asked him why they even kept it in circulation. He shrugged and said, "Corporate doesn't care unless someone dies in there."
I froze. Wait, has someone? He just walked off. I tried Googling it later, but didn't find anything. Still, I think about that silhouette sometimes, how solid it looked, how it didn't vanish until the light hit it. Something was in that room, watching, waiting. I'll never take another cruise again. Have you ever heard the man overboard alarm on a cruise ship? It's not something most people ever experience. It's rare. And when it goes off, it sends a chill down your spine that you can't explain unless you've lived it. This happened in 2022, on a cruise from Miami to Cozumel. I was traveling with my girlfriend, Kelly, and her 2 friends. We'd been saving up for this trip for months, and everything about it was perfect, at least, until night 3. We were about 300 miles out at sea, no land in sight. It was 2:46 a.m. when the alarm jolted us awake. A shrill tone echoed through the ship's PA system, followed by an automated voice. "Man overboard, starboard side, man overboard." At first, I thought it was a drill, but the ship doesn't run drills at that time, and it wasn't followed by any instructions. We stepped outside onto the balcony of our stateroom and looked out into the black ocean. Searchlights were already sweeping the waves. You could see crew members running down the outer decks, radios crackling. Something real was happening. We stayed up for hours after that. The search continued until sunrise. We later heard through another guest that a passenger had fallen or jumped from deck 11. No one ever found them. The weird thing is, no one ever officially confirmed it. The ship's staff was tight-lipped. The captain made one announcement the next day, just saying they were investigating a security incident and thanking guests for their cooperation. That was it. But that's not where the story ends. That night, the night after the alarm, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., I stepped out onto the balcony again. The ocean looked endless, just blackness. The air was thick and still, and then I heard it. From the water below, faint, but unmistakable, someone was calling for help. "Help! Help me!" I froze. It was a male voice, weak but clear. I leaned over the railing, scanning the water below. Nothing. I ran back inside and woke Kelly. She came out and listened, but the voice was gone. She thought I was overtired or maybe just shaken from the alarm. But I knew what I heard. The next night, I heard it again. Same time. Same voice. "Help, please." This time, it sounded closer, like it was directly beneath our cabin. I wasn't imagining it. I recorded it on my phone, but when I played it back, there was nothing, just the sound of ocean waves. That morning, I decided to talk to a crew member. I found a steward named Mateo, and I straight up asked, "Has anyone reported hearing voices from the water?"
He didn't answer right away. Just looked down, then said quietly, "You're in 1036, right? That's almost right above where it happened.
I asked him if they ever recovered the body.
He shook his head. No, and we've had issues ever since.
What kind of issues? I asked.
Mateo glanced around, made sure no one was nearby, and whispered, "Some guests in that part of the ship hear voices, always at night, always asking for help. Some even see someone floating in the water, waving. But when they go to report it, he's gone."
I felt sick. We changed rooms that day, but I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. Whoever he was still out there. Or at least, something was. On the last night of the cruise, I was walking back to our room from the buffet. Our new room was on deck 6 when I saw something that still haunts me. The hallway was empty, dimly lit. Ahead of me, I saw a man standing barefoot in a soaked white t-shirt and swim trunks. He was dripping wet, leaving puddles behind him on the carpet. His skin looked pale, his eyes vacant. He was just standing there, staring at the wall. I said, "Hey, are you okay?" But he didn't react. I took one step closer. He slowly turned to look at me. His lips parted like he was about to say something, and then, just like that, he vanished. No fade, no blink, just gone. I screamed and sprinted back to the room. Told Kelly everything. She believed me this time because she'd heard the voice herself the night before. We left a note in the anonymous comment box before disembarking. "Stop booking rooms above the area where the man fell. Someone is still out there." We never got a reply. Of course we didn't, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll wake up with that voice echoing in my ears. "Help, please." You ever see something so out of place it makes your brain stall for a second, like your mind just refuses to process it? That's what happened when I found the door. A door that shouldn't have been there, a door that no one else seemed to see. I was on a transatlantic cruise from Barcelona to Miami. My company had paid for the trip as part of a long service reward. It was a massive ship, 15 decks, theaters, pools, a casino, basically, a floating city. I wasn't planning to do much except read, sleep, and maybe drink too much. It was on the 4th day when I got curious about something. I was reading the deck guide and noticed that deck 13 wasn't listed. It went straight from 12 to 14. Now, I know a lot of buildings skip 13 for superstitious reasons, but on a cruise ship, I figured it was just renumbered or maybe reserved for maintenance. But the weird thing was, the elevator panel did have a button for deck 13, sort of. The numbers were arranged vertically, and between 12 and 14, there was a blank, unlit button. No number, just a black plastic key. I thought it was maybe for crew access, but when I pressed it, nothing happened. No light. The elevator skipped it. Still, I couldn't let it go. Later that night, around 11:30 p.m., I decided to walk down the stairwell instead. I figured maybe I could get a peek at whatever was between those two decks. Deck 12, fine, lights on, guests walking around. Deck 14, normal. But as I stepped between them, I noticed something strange. The landing between the two levels had a narrow side hallway, almost hidden. There was a short metal door, painted black, about 4 feet tall. You had to crouch to get through it. No sign, no handle, just a keyhole. I swear I stood there for 5 full minutes just staring at it. That door wasn't on any map. I decided to take a photo, but my phone froze. Just a black screen. Wouldn't turn on again until I walked back up to deck 14. The next day, I asked a crew member if the ship had a deck 13.
She laughed uncomfortably and said, "Of course not. Most cruise lines avoid it. Bad luck, you know."
I told her I found a door between 12 and 14. Her face changed.
She said, "You probably found a maintenance hatch."
I described the short black door. She didn't respond, just walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m. I went back. The hallway was empty, the lights dimmed for night mode. I took the stairwell back down, and sure enough, there it was. Only now, the door was open, just slightly ajar. A crack wide enough to see a faint red glow coming from inside. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped closer. The air was freezing, like walking into a meat locker. I crouched down and peeked in. It was a narrow hallway, lit by dim red bulbs, sloping downward. I couldn't see the end of it. But I heard something. Breathing. Slow. Heavy breathing. Not from the door. From behind me. I whipped around, nothing. The hallway was still empty. I turned back. The door was shut. No sound. No red light. Just a black metal door that now looked completely sealed, like it had never been open. I sprinted out of there and went straight to security. I told them everything: the hidden door, the red hallway, the breathing. They were polite, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Or maybe they did, and just couldn't say anything. When I asked if I could see the ship's blueprints, they flat out said no. The rest of the trip I avoided that part of the ship, but the night before we docked in Miami, I saw something I can't explain. Around 2 a.m., I was sitting out on the deck alone, just watching the water. I looked up toward the center of the ship and saw a figure standing behind a round porthole 2 decks above. I counted the decks. It was exactly where deck 13 would be. The figure didn't move, just stared. Then the porthole slowly fogged up as if something inside was breathing on the glass. I blinked and it was gone. I left the next day without telling anyone else, but I couldn't stop thinking about that hallway, the red glow, the door that only appeared at night. What's behind it? I don't want to know anymore. But if you're ever on a ship and notice the elevator has a blank button, don't press it. And for the love of God, don't open the door. I didn't believe in ghosts until I went on a cruise with one. It was supposed to be a celebratory trip. My younger sister, Anna, had just graduated, and our parents booked a week-long cruise for the family, me, Anna, and our mom. We boarded the ship in Fort Lauderdale and were bound for the Bahamas. Everything felt normal the first couple of days. Warm weather, cold drinks, laughter, the perfect escape. But on the third night, I noticed something strange. There was this girl, early 20s, pale, long black hair, who kept showing up in the background. I first saw her at the buffet, standing by the drink station, just staring at the soda machine without taking anything. I figured she was just zoning out. But then I saw her again that same night at the comedy club, seated at the very back, arms folded, eyes locked on the stage, not laughing, not smiling, just watching. Still, nothing weird. Until Anna noticed her too. We were lying out on deck 10 the next afternoon, soaking up the sun, when Anna leaned over and whispered, "That girl is following us." I looked up, confused. She nodded subtly toward the poolside bar. She was behind us in line earlier, then again at the elevator, now here. It was the same girl, pale, expressionless, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans despite the heat. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't with anyone, just standing behind a lifeguard chair, staring directly at us. That night, Anna asked Mom if she'd seen her, too. Mom said no, but her face darkened when we described the girl. "She sounds like someone I used to know," Mom said, avoiding eye contact. We tried to shrug it off, but it got worse. The next day, we went down to the photo gallery, the place where they hang up candid pictures taken by cruise photographers. There were rows and rows of pictures of people smiling, dancing, eating, all with that glossy cruise lighting. But in 3 separate photos of us, the girl was in the background, not standing, leaning. In one photo, she was behind Anna, leaning into frame with her face half visible. In another, she was crouched behind a table near where we sat, her eyes pointed straight at the lens. And in the third one, she was standing directly behind me, a faint grin on her face. We hadn't seen her in any of those moments, not once. It was like she was invisible until the photos were developed. We brought the photos to the guest services desk and asked who she was. The crew member scanned the barcodes and checked the passenger registry.
Then he said something that chilled me. "There's no one on board by that name, and she doesn't appear in the facial recognition system."
"But she's in these photos," I said, holding them out.
He just nodded. "Sometimes strange images show up."
I asked what that meant. He wouldn't explain. That night, Anna woke me up around 3 a.m., shaking. She was in our room. "What?" "She was standing over you while you slept." I sat up, panicked. The lights were off. I scrambled for the switch. Nothing. The power was out. The room was ice cold. And from the corner, we both heard it, a soft, gurgling breath. Anna screamed. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and flicked it on. The beam hit the wall. Then the corner. Empty. No one there. The lights came back on a few seconds later. We called security. They did a full sweep. Nothing. After that, we refused to sleep with the lights off. Mom didn't believe us, or said she didn't, but she started locking her cabin door at night after that. On the last day of the cruise, we were docked back in Fort Lauderdale, waiting to disembark. Anna and I were standing on the balcony, watching the crew move luggage onto the dock. That's when we saw her again. She was standing behind the glass door of a crew-only exit, just inside the ship. Her face was pressed to the glass, that same blank expression. No crew members acknowledged her. No one walked by her. And then, right before our eyes, she turned and walked back into the darkness of the ship. We left without saying anything to anyone. A few weeks later, Anna got curious and started digging online. She found a forum thread from 3 years earlier, someone asking if anyone else had seen a girl on that same ship. The description was identical. Dozens of replies followed, people describing a pale woman who appeared in photos, stared from doorways, or stood in cabins at night. No one knew her name. No one ever found a record of her being a guest. They just called her the passenger who wasn't there. I didn't think anything of it the first night I stayed in room 409. But when I woke up at 2:13 a.m. to the sound of someone quietly trying my door handle, I knew something wasn't right. I was in town for work, a small rainy coastal town that barely looked like it belonged in this decade. My company booked me into the Bayview Inn, an old 3-story hotel that smelled faintly of salt water and mildew, the kind of place that still used brass keys instead of keycards. When I checked in, the receptionist, a woman in her 50s with deep crow's feet and a voice like she'd been smoking for 40 years, handed me my key without much small talk.
Room 409, top floor, end of the hall, she said, sliding the key across the counter.
The hallway leading to my room was long and narrow, with faded blue carpet and dim wall sconces. My door was the last one before a window at the very end. When I stepped inside, the room smelled stale. Not dirty, just like no one had opened a window in years. That first night, I unpacked, called my wife, and fell asleep watching some mindless late-night TV. The sound woke me up, a faint metallic click, like the door handle turning. I froze. My heart started pounding in my ears. I sat up slowly, staring at the silhouette of the door and the faint light from the street lamp outside the window. The handle jiggled again, quietly, like someone was testing it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking a little. The sound stopped. Whoever it was didn't answer, just walked away. I heard slow, muffled footsteps fade down the carpeted hallway. I told myself it was probably housekeeping who'd accidentally come to the wrong room, but it was 2 a.m. That didn't make sense. Still, I managed to go back to sleep. The second night was worse. I'd been at a client dinner that ran late. When I finally got back to the hotel around 11, I noticed the lobby was empty, except for the receptionist from before. She gave me a strange look when I walked past, like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. That night, I woke again at almost exactly the same time, 2:12 a.m. I don't know what stirred me, but my eyes opened just in time to see the shadow of 2 feet at the crack under my door. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The handle turned slow, deliberate. This time, I heard a faint, wet breathing on the other side. Not fast or panicked, just steady. I whispered, "Go away," before I could stop myself. The breathing paused. The shadow didn't move. Then, finally, the feet shifted, and I heard them walk away. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I went down to the front desk. "Someone keeps trying to get into my room in the middle of the night," I told the receptionist.
Her eyes flicked up at me and her lips pressed into a tight line. "You're in 409?
"Yeah." She hesitated before saying, "There shouldn't be anyone on that floor but you."
I frowned. "What about the other rooms?" "They're closed for maintenance," she said, looking past me at the empty lobby. "If it happens again, call the front desk immediately."
The third night, I did something stupid. I set my phone to record audio before I went to bed, just to see if I could catch whatever it was. Sure enough, at exactly 2:11 a.m., the sound started. Slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway. My pulse spiked as they stopped right outside my door. The handle turned once, twice. Then there was a light tap against the wood. Not a knock, just one soft touch, like someone laying their palm flat against it. I stayed perfectly still, gripping the handle of the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. Then, a voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was low and hoarse, right at the edge of the door. I was about to yell when the whispering stopped, replaced by a sound that made my skin crawl. A long, deliberate sniff, like whoever it was smelling the crack of the door. That was enough. The next morning, I went back to the desk and told the receptionist I wanted to switch rooms. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for me to say it.
You're not the first, she said quietly. But 409 isn't supposed to be rented out at all.
I stared at her. Then why was I put there?
Her eyes darted to the side. It's complicated. When I pressed her, she shook her head. It's an old building. Sometimes people linger. Just stay in your new room and you'll be fine.
I moved to the second floor. My new room was smaller, but I didn't care. That night, I finally felt like I'd be able to sleep. But at 2:15 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of footsteps, not in the hallway above me. Room 409 was directly overhead. And right before I turned on the light, I heard it. 3 slow, heavy knocks coming from the floor. Story 2. The gas station attendant. I was the only customer at that gas station. So when the attendant asked me, "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" I realized he was afraid of something, and it wasn't me. It was almost midnight. I'd been driving cross-country for 14 hours and needed caffeine to keep me going. The glowing sign for a gas and go appeared out of nowhere along the empty highway, and I pulled in. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 90s. Buzzing fluorescent lights, 2 lonely pumps, and a convenience store with dusty shelves. The man behind the counter was in his 50s, wearing a faded red work shirt with a name tag that said Carl. He gave me a polite nod when I came in, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the glass doors every few seconds. I grabbed a coffee and some snacks and brought them to the counter. That's when he leaned forward slightly and asked, "Where you headed?" "Seattle," I said, swiping my card. He hesitated before asking, "You traveling alone?" The question felt a little too personal, but I shrugged. "Yeah." Carl's eyes darted again toward the glass doors. "Well, you might want to get back on the road quick." I frowned. "Why?" He didn't answer, just handed me the receipt and said, "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" That's when my stomach tightened. I shook my head. "I'm fine." Carl gave me a long look like he was debating saying more, then quietly said, "Just don't talk to him." I had no idea what he meant, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me hard. My car was parked right in front of the store. Halfway there, I noticed the smell faint but distinct, like rotting meat. Then I saw movement. Someone was standing at the far end of the parking lot, in the shadow between 2 flickering streetlights. They weren't moving toward me, just standing there, facing me. At first, I thought it was a homeless guy, but something about the way they were standing was wrong. Perfectly still. Too still. I glanced back through the store's glass door. Carl was at the counter, watching me intently. His lips moved. He was mouthing something. "Get in the car." I unlocked my door and slid in, locking it behind me. When I looked back toward the figure, it was closer. I hadn't heard footsteps. They were just closer. The parking lot light flickered, and I caught a glimpse of the man's face, pale, gaunt, and smiling too wide. His clothes looked wet, hanging heavy on his frame. I turned the key, my hands shaking. As my headlights came on, the man tilted his head and started walking toward me. No, not walking, gliding. I threw the car into reverse and backed out fast. The figure stopped at the edge of the light, just watching me leave. I didn't slow down until I was back on the highway. My heart was still pounding when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text. No caller ID, just 4 words. You shouldn't have left. I didn't stop driving for another 80 miles. When I finally pulled into another gas station, I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing, the man, the smell, the text. But as I got out to pump gas, I froze. Across the lot, under a single flickering light, he was standing there. Same wet clothes, same smile. And this time, he waved. Story 3. The man in the passenger seat. The first time I saw him, he was already in my car. The second time, he smiled. It was a little after 2 a.m. on a Friday in late October. I just finished my bartending shift at a place downtown and was walking to my car in the employee lot a few blocks away. The streets were empty, the air sharp with the kind of cold that makes your ears ache. My feet hurt, my eyes burned, and I was ready to collapse into bed. The lot was dark except for a single yellow streetlight buzzing above the far corner. My car, a 2010 Toyota Camry, was parked near the middle. I hit the unlock button on my key fob, saw the hazard lights blink, and then froze. Through the driver's side window, I saw him. A man. Sitting in the passenger seat. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I blinked hard, adjusted my angle. He didn't move. His head was tilted slightly, face turned toward me, but the darkness made it impossible to see details. My stomach knotted instantly. I took a step back. The only sound was the hum of the streetlight. My key fob was still in my hand. I pressed lock again, nothing. The Camry's lights didn't blink this time. That's when it hit me, my car was already unlocked. I started backing away, scanning the lot for anyone else. It was completely empty. When I looked back at the car, the passenger seat was empty. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe I'd seen my own reflection. Finally, I crept forward, phone in hand, flashlight ready. I shone it through the windows, nothing. The interior was exactly how I'd left it. My work bag on the back seat, an empty coffee cup in the holder. The doors were all unlocked. I checked the back seat twice before finally getting in. My hands shook as I locked the doors from the inside. When I started the engine, my headlights flared across the lot and lit up a man standing just outside the glow. Too far to make out clearly, but close enough to know it wasn't my imagination. I drove home fast, checking my mirrors the whole way. My apartment building's parking lot was empty. I ran upstairs, locked my door, and didn't sleep a second that night. The next morning, I told myself it had to have been some drunk who wandered into the wrong car. Creepy, sure, but not supernatural. Not dangerous. By my next shift, a few nights later, the memory had dulled. I parked in a different spot this time, under the streetlight. My shift ended just after 1 a.m., and I walked out with another bartender, Steph. We chatted until she got in her car, then I headed to mine. That's when I saw him again, not in the lot this time, not across the street. He was sitting in my passenger seat. This time, the glow from the streetlight lit his face pale, drawn tight like he hadn't eaten in days, and eyes that didn't blink. His hair was wet, clinging to his forehead. But the worst part was his mouth. He was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. His lips were stretched too far, exposing too much gum, teeth clenched together like he was holding something back. I stopped dead, my keys halfway to my hand. My breath turned to frost in front of me. I was about to run when his head twitched a tiny sudden jerk. And then his smile widened. I bolted, didn't look back. I ran straight to Steph's car and banged on the window. She jumped, rolled it down halfway.
What the hell?
There's a man in my car, I gasped. She turned to look, but when I did too, the passenger seat was empty. Again, I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. Steph insisted on walking me back, but of course there was no one there. Doors locked, no sign of forced entry. She thought I was overworked, maybe seeing things. But I knew what I'd seen. The third time wasn't in the parking lot. It was in my driveway. It had been a week since the last incident. I'd taken to checking the back seat every time I got in the car, locking the doors religiously, even while driving. I'd stopped telling people about it. No one believed me anyway. That Friday night, I pulled into my driveway around midnight. My porch light was on, my little apartment above the garage glowing warm and safe. I cut the engine and sat for a moment, scrolling my phone. When I glanced up into the rearview mirror, my heart stopped. He was sitting in the passenger seat. I didn't see him open the door. I didn't hear movement. He was just there. Same wet hair, same pale skin, same stretched, unnatural smile. But this time, he was looking directly at me in the mirror. I couldn't breathe. My hand went to the door handle, but I was frozen, torn between bolting and staying perfectly still. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and put one finger to his lips. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't remember running up the stairs to my apartment or slamming the door behind me. When I looked out the window a few seconds later, my car was empty. I moved out of that apartment within the month, sold the Camry too, but every now and then, when I'm stopped at a light at night, I'll glance over at the empty passenger seat and swear I can see a faint reflection of him, smiling just for me. Story 4. Under the Porch. The night I realized someone was living under my porch, I had already been hearing them for weeks. It started as small noises, a creak here, a scrape there. I told myself it was the house settling, maybe an opossum digging through leaves. But by the time I could hear breathing, I knew it was something else entirely. I live in a small one-story rental in a quiet neighborhood outside of town. No roommates, no pets. The porch is an old wooden structure built a foot or so off the ground, with just enough space underneath for raccoons, stray cats, or, apparently, people. The first real incident was a Thursday night in late September. I was sitting on my couch with the window cracked open, scrolling my phone, when I heard the slow, rhythmic sound of footsteps on dry leaves. Coming from directly under me, I muted the TV. The footsteps stopped. For a good 30 seconds, I didn't move. Then, when I thought it was over, I heard a faint shh, 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 like someone dragging their fingers along the wood slats beneath the floor. I stood up and peered out the front window, but the darkness under the porch swallowed everything. Eventually, I convinced myself it was an animal. The sound had that uneven quality, like a four-legged creature. Still, I went outside with a flashlight and shined it through the gap at the base of the porch. Nothing. The noises continued every few nights, always after midnight, always under the porch. Sometimes it sounded like scratching, sometimes shuffling. Twice, I heard a weird, low humming, almost like someone singing under their breath. I even called my landlord about it, but he just told me to spray for pests and said the porch had been there since the 60s. It wasn't until the second week that I realized how wrong I'd been. It was 2 a.m., and I'd just gotten up for a glass of water. I'd left the kitchen window open, the one that faces the front yard. As I stood at the sink, I heard it breathing. Not fast or panicked. Slow, steady, human, and it was right outside the window. I froze, my hand still on the faucet. After a few seconds, the breathing stopped. Then I heard a whisper. 2 words, soft but unmistakable. I see you. I dropped my glass, water splashing across the counter. I ran to the front door, slammed it shut, and locked every window in the house. The rest of the night, I stayed in bed with the covers pulled up, listening for any sound. Every creak felt like it was coming from directly beneath me. In the morning, I went outside with my phone camera ready. At first glance, there was nothing, but when I crouched down and looked deeper under the porch, my stomach flipped. There was a pile of blankets in the far corner, a plastic grocery bag with food wrappers spilling out, and in the dirt, a dent where someone's head had clearly been resting. I backed away, already dialing the police. They came within 15 minutes. The officer crouched down, shined his flashlight, and shook his head. "Whoever was here is gone," he said. "Could be a squatter. We see it sometimes." They didn't find any ID. No personal belongings beyond the trash and bedding. The officer suggested I put up chicken wire or a skirt around the porch. That night, I barely slept. 3 days later, it happened again. This time, it was just after midnight. I'd shut all the windows, turned off the lights, and was lying in bed when I heard the faintest creak. From inside the house, I sat up, straining to hear. The sound was coming from the living room right above the section of porch where I'd found the blankets. It was followed by a slow, dragging step, Then, another. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone and whispered to 911, giving my address. The operator told me to stay put and keep quiet. I listened as the footsteps moved closer to my bedroom door. Then they stopped. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds before I heard that same low humming. It was right outside my room. The front door burst open a minute later as 2 officers rushed in. I heard shouting, heavy footsteps, but when they reached my room, they were alone. They found no one inside. One of them went to check under the porch again while the other asked me questions. When the first officer came back, he was pale. "They're gone," he said quietly, "but they've been watching you." He handed me something wrapped in a latex glove. It was a disposable camera, half-used, the kind you have to develop. When the photos came back a week later, I almost threw up. Half of them were pictures of the underside of my porch. The other half were taken through my windows. Me on the couch, me sleeping, me in the kitchen, pouring water. The last photo was taken from my bedroom doorway. I moved out the next day. I don't know who was living under my porch, or how many nights they watched me without me knowing. But I do know one thing. If you ever hear breathing outside your window at night, don't assume you're alone. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of someone tapping on my hotel window. That wouldn't be strange if my room wasn't on the 12th floor. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. The tapping was light, like fingernails on glass, and it came in sets of 3. I sat up, groggy, my heart already picking up speed. The curtains were drawn, but the faint glow of the city seeped in around the edges. I stared at them for a solid minute, waiting for the sound again. Then it came. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch, even though there were no trees anywhere near this building. I reached for my phone, but before I could check the time again, something moved on the other side of the curtain, a shadow. I froze. The shape was human, but distorted like someone crouching, head tilted, pressing close to the glass. Every instinct told me not to touch the curtain. But I was alone in the room, hundreds of miles from home, and curiosity was eating me alive. I grabbed the curtain edge and yanked it open in one quick motion. Nothing, just the sprawling lights of the city below. My reflection in the glass. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was paranoid, and let the curtain fall back into place. But I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same tap. Tap, tap. Only this time, when I opened the curtain, I swear I saw something, not a person exactly, but the impression of one. A faint smudge, like the oily outline a hand leaves on glass. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the cold pain beneath. That's when I noticed something impossible. The smudge was on the inside. I checked the lock on the window. It was secure. There was no balcony, no fire escape, just a sheer drop down 12 floors. I barely slept that night, and when I did, my dreams were filled with the sound of tapping. On the third night, I decided to stay awake and catch whoever or whatever was messing with me. I left the lights off, sat in the chair facing the window, and waited. Hours passed. The city outside dimmed as more buildings went dark. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I saw it. Not through the glass this time, but reflected inside the room, in the faint light from the street lamps. A figure crouched in the corner by the window. I spun around, heart pounding, but the corner was empty. When I looked back at the glass, the reflection was gone. I wanted to call the front desk, but I knew how it would sound. "Hi, I think there's a ghost in my window." So instead, I decided to leave the hotel the next day. I started packing around midnight. At 1:30 a.m., as I shoved clothes into my bag, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. I ignored it. Then from directly behind me, I heard the whisper. "Don't look." I turned anyway. The window was wide open. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because hotel security was banging on my door within minutes. They searched the room, the hallway, even the roof. No one was there. The window had no exterior ledge, no rope, no harness. When I checked out in the morning, the front desk clerk gave me a strange look.
You were in 1214, right?
I nodded. Her smile faded.
That room's been vacant for months. We've had reports before. People say they hear someone tapping on the glass.
That was 3 weeks ago. I'm home now. My bedroom window is on the second floor, and there's a big maple tree right outside. But last night, at 3:17 a.m., I woke up to a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. Story 1. The knocking in the hallway. Have you ever been home alone and felt like your house suddenly changed? That's what happened to me last winter. I was 19, living with my parents, and they'd gone away for the weekend. It was late Friday night, around midnight, and I was lying on the couch watching some random Netflix show when I heard 3 slow knocks. They weren't on the front door. They were coming from the hallway that led to my bedroom. I muted the TV and sat there, listening. At first I thought maybe it was the house settling, but then I heard it again. 3 knocks. This time closer. The thing is, there's no door in that hallway, just the 3 bedrooms and the bathroom. I stood up, walked a few steps toward the hall, and froze. I swear I saw movement, like someone stepping back into the shadows of my room. Hello? My voice cracked. No answer. I told myself I was being paranoid. I flicked on the hallway light, nothing. My bedroom door was half open. I went in, checked the closet, looked under the bed, empty. I tried to shake it off and went back to the couch. 20 minutes later, just as I was starting to relax, I heard it again. This time the knocks were right behind me. I spun around and there was nothing there, just the hallway stretching into darkness. But then, from the bathroom, I heard the sound of the shower curtain being pulled. Slow. I grabbed my phone, called my neighbor, and told him to come over. I didn't move until I saw his headlights outside. The weirdest part? In the bathroom, the shower curtain was drawn completely shut, and I never close it. When my sister asked me to babysit her 1-year-old while she went on a date, I didn't think twice. She lived just a couple of streets over, so I walked there after dinner. By 9 p.m., the baby was asleep in the crib upstairs. I settled on the couch, scrolling through my phone, with the baby monitor on the coffee table. About an hour later, I heard static coming from the monitor. I leaned closer and I heard a voice. It wasn't the baby. It was a man's voice, whispering something I couldn't quite make out. My heart started racing. I turned up the volume just enough to hear it. Don't go upstairs. I froze. I tried to tell myself it was interference, maybe picking up a neighbor's radio or something, but then I heard it again, louder this time. He's awake. I grabbed my sister's landline and called her cell. She didn't answer. I decided to go check the baby myself, monitor still in hand. The second I stepped into the hallway, the monitor blared with sharp static, then silence. I pushed the bedroom door open. The baby was still asleep, but the window, which had been locked earlier, was wide open. Cold air was blowing in. I shut and locked it immediately, grabbed the baby, and went back downstairs. I didn't put him back in the crib until my sister came home. When I told her what happened, she said the same thing had occurred once before, but the whisper had told her, "Don't look out the window." 2 years ago, I was living in a rented house while in college. It had this creepy, unfinished basement that I almost never went into. One night in October, I was home alone. My roommate was away for the weekend. Around 11 p.m., I heard a loud thud from downstairs. I figured something had fallen in the kitchen, but when I checked, everything was fine. That's when I realized the sound had come from beneath me. The basement. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly opened the basement door. It was pitch black. The stairs creaked under my feet as I went down, shining the light around. Halfway down, I froze. There was a man standing at the bottom of the stairs. He wasn't moving, just standing there, head tilted slightly to the side, staring up at me. "What are you doing there?" I nearly dropped the flashlight. My voice cracked as I asked what he was doing there. "You weren't supposed to hear me." I bolted back upstairs, slammed the basement door, and locked it. Then I called 911. When police arrived, they found muddy footprints leading from a small broken basement window to a corner where the man had apparently been hiding. But here's what still keeps me up at night. The officer told me the man had been living down there for at least a week. Story 3. The footsteps in the attic. Have you ever been home alone and heard something you just couldn't explain? The kind of sound that makes you stop breathing because you know it shouldn't be there. This happened about a year ago in my small 2-bedroom rental house. I was home alone for the weekend while my roommate visited her family. Friday night. I just got out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, scrolling on my phone in bed. That's when I heard it thump, thump, thump. The sound came from directly above me. My bedroom was under the attic. The noises were heavy, slow footsteps. I froze. We didn't store anything up there. It wasn't like a raccoon or squirrel could sound that heavy. My phone lit up with a text from my roommate. Made it home safe? I didn't answer. I just stared at the ceiling. Another sound, a long dragging noise, like something being pulled across the attic floor. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I slowly got dressed, trying not to make any sound. The attic entrance was in the hallway outside my room. Just a square panel in the ceiling with a pull-down ladder. I stared at it, and I swear, I saw the slightest movement in the panel, like someone nudged it from the inside. I grabbed my keys and bolted out of the house without shoes. I called the police from my car, telling them someone was in my attic. 2 officers arrived and went inside while I waited outside shaking. When they came back out, they looked disturbed. They didn't find anyone, but they found a sleeping bag, food wrappers, and an empty bottle of water in the attic corner. One officer said quietly, "Whoever was up there, they were living there for a while. I moved out within the month."
Story 4. The Man in the Window. Early winter, the sun set before 6 p.m. I was 16, home alone for the first time in a while. My parents had gone out for dinner. They'd be back by 9. Around 7, I was curled up on the couch watching TV. The blinds were open just enough to see the faint reflection of my living room lights in the glass. At some point, I saw something strange in that reflection. A face. Pale, expressionless, pressed against the glass outside. I froze in shock, eyes flicking toward the window. By the time I turned my head fully, there was nothing there. My heart was pounding. I tried convincing myself it was just my brain playing tricks. 10 minutes later, I went into the kitchen to grab water. Movement in the backyard through the sliding glass door. A tall man stood at the far end, half in the shadows, looking at the house. I ducked and crawled away, grabbing my phone to call my dad. He told me to lock all the doors and stay on the line. I could hear his voice shaking, even though he tried to sound calm. I locked everything and sat in my room with the lights off. I thought I heard faint tapping on the glass again, but I refused to look. When my parents pulled into the driveway, my dad ran straight to the backyard. The man was gone. There were fresh footprints in the frost, leading right up to my bedroom window. Story 5. The Hallway Breathing. My first apartment, about 5 years ago. Small 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of an old building. One night I was alone, lying in bed, scrolling on my phone. My bedroom door was cracked open. From my bed I could see down the short hallway to the living room. The place was silent, until I heard breathing. At first I thought it was the neighbors through the thin walls, but it was slow, steady, unmistakably coming from the hallway, like someone was standing just out of sight, taking deep breaths. I sat up, staring at the dark hallway. The breathing didn't stop. My mouth went dry. I whispered, "Hello?" It stopped immediately. That silence was worse than the sound itself. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed. I walked toward the hallway light switch, hands shaking. When I finally flipped it on, the hallway was empty. I checked every room, every closet, under the bed, even the balcony. Nothing. When I went back into my bedroom, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The door to my closet was slightly open. I never leave it like that. I slammed it shut and piled stuff in front of it. That night, I slept with the lights on. Story 6. The Voice in the Basement. My house growing up had an unfinished basement. It was cold, damp, and creepy. I avoided going down there unless I had to do laundry. One evening when I was home alone, I heard something from the basement. A voice. It was faint, but it sounded like a man saying something over and over in a calm, almost conversational tone. I froze at the top of the stairs trying to make out the words. It sounded like, "Come down here! Come down here!" Every hair on my body stood up. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, backing away slowly. My first thought was to call my parents, but then the voice got louder. It wasn't yelling, just closer. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and ran upstairs to my bedroom, locking that door too. I called my neighbor, a retired cop, and begged him to come over. When he arrived, we went down into the basement together. It was empty. No signs of forced entry, no hiding spots big enough for a person. But there was something odd, an old disconnected landline phone lying on the floor. It was off the hook, and I swear I could still faintly hear the sound of someone breathing through it.
Story 2. The Voice in the Baby Monitor. Story 1. The Man in the Closet. My name's Tessa, and I was 15 when it happened. It was late September. The air cooling just enough to make the evenings crisp, but warm enough that most people still left their windows cracked. I'd been babysitting for the Rowans for a couple of months by then. They had one little girl, Mia, who was 4. The house itself was small and tidy. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened into the living room, and a long hallway running down the middle. It wasn't the sort of place you expected to feel unsafe in. Mrs. Rowan was covering an extra evening shift at the bookstore, and Mr. Rowan was out of town at a conference. She asked me to stay until 11 p.m. I didn't think twice. She left at 6:30, kissing Mia goodnight in advance and reminding me to lock the front door. I did, then made grilled cheese for the 2 of us. We ate in the living room while cartoons played softly. Mia giggled through mouthfuls of bread and cheese, crumbs falling into her lap. By 8:00, Mia was yawning. Bedtime was part of the deal, so I guided her to her room. She insisted her closet light stay on, just like she always did. Her mom once told me she was afraid of the dark, but never said why. I tucked her in, smoothed her hair, and left the door ajar so the light could spill out. Back in the living room, I scrolled my phone for a while. The only sounds were the faint hum of the refrigerator and a car passing now and then outside. But around 8:45, I heard something else, a faint, muffled shuffle, like fabric moving. It came from the hallway. I got up, figuring Mia had gotten out of bed, but when I peeked into her room, she was fast asleep, one arm over her stuffed rabbit. That's when I realized the sound was coming from inside her closet. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to check. Finally, I walked over, placed my hand on the door, and listened. Nothing. I slid the door open quickly. Just dresses, shirts, and a plastic bin of toys. No one there. I told myself it was the clothes swaying from air movement. Still, I checked the window. It was shut. I went back to the living room, but that uneasy feeling clung to me. At 9:10, the noise came again, this time followed by something that made my skin prickle. A faint breath. Not Mia's soft, even breathing from the bed, but a slow, deliberate exhale. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I crept back down the hall. This time I didn't hesitate. I yanked the door open wide and my stomach dropped. Behind a row of hanging clothes, in the back wall of the closet, there was a rectangular cutout like an access panel. It was just big enough for someone to crawl through, and it was open, revealing a black void beyond. I slammed the closet door shut, scooped Mia up. She stirred, but didn't wake, and carried her to the living room. I called my mom, whispering that I needed her now. She arrived in under 5 minutes, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions until we were outside. When the police came, they found footprints in the dust on the boards behind that opening, along with an old blanket tucked in the corner of a narrow crawl space between the walls. No one was inside. They never found who it was or how long they'd been using that space. The Rowans sealed the opening the next week, but I never babysat for them again. Even now, I check my closet before bed not because I think someone's there, but because once there was. Story 2. The House Across the Street. I was 16, babysitting for the Grants 2 doors down from my place. Friday nights were routine: oven pizza, homework at their dining table, and lights out by 9 for Owen and Emma. Their living room always made me feel a little exposed. It had these huge picture windows that faced the street like a stage, and across from them sat the old Webster house peeling paint, boarded side door, no curtains. The kids called it the Watcher's House. I laughed the first time, but that laugh always died early, like it ran out of air. That night, rain came in thin sheets, glistening off the streetlight. Inside, the Grants' place smelled like detergent and crayons. Owen and Emma drew astronauts at the table while I sliced apples and pretended not to glance out the window every 30 seconds. Around 8:10, Owen stopped coloring, stared out the window, and went very still. I followed his gaze and saw only rain. "He's there," he said softly. I crouched beside him. "Who?" He didn't answer, just raised his finger to the window and then, weirdly, lowered it, like pointing was against some private rule. Emma leaned into me and whispered, "Don't look too long." It was the way she said it, gentle, like advice, not fear, that made something cold pass through my chest. I got them upstairs early, partly because it was bedtime, and partly because I wanted any eyes to know the show was over. The kids brushed their teeth while I peeked at the front yard through the upstairs hallway window. The rain made the street look like a smear of mercury. Everything was empty. I tucked them in, checked their nightlight, and promised I'd be in the living room. On my way out, Owen said, "If he knocks, don't open." I smiled and told him the obvious. I wasn't opening for anyone. At 9:07. Funny how exact times fix themselves in your memory. I muted the TV because I heard something soft and deliberate. 3 taps on glass, not on the door, on glass. The taps came again, from the big picture window. I stepped into the lamplight and immediately stepped back because there was a pale shape very close on the other side. Not a face, a hand. An open hand resting flat against the window like a child testing a fish tank. I didn't scream. Something about the openness of the gesture short-circuited fear and replaced it with calculation. I slipped behind the couch, crouched, and craned my neck to the side so I could see without being seen. The hand lingered, pressed lightly, then lifted. It had no glove. The fingers were long, and the palm had a dark crescent scar at the base of the thumb. The hand lowered out of sight, and a figure stepped back into the rain. Tall, black jacket, no hat. He didn't try the door. He didn't even peer in. He simply retreated. I dashed to the front hall, threw the deadbolt, slid the chain, and fetched the small wooden wedge the Grants kept to jam under the door. I turned off the living room lamp so the house went from aquarium bright to dim. In the reflection of the window, my own face floated over the street. Across the way, the Webster house seemed to inhale. The upstairs left window looked darker than the rest, and as my eyes adjusted, I realized why. Someone was standing there, not close enough to see details, but close enough that the darkness had a shape. The rain led up to a mist. That's when I heard the side gate clang. The Grants' side yard was latched, not locked. The sound was the latch, followed by the soft thud of the gate swinging into the hedge. I froze and listened for footsteps in the wet grass. Nothing. I went halfway up the stairs so I could see both the hallway to the kids' room and the rectangle of the kitchen doorway that framed the back door's frosted glass. A smudge moved behind it, like someone testing whether their shadow would show. The doorknob tweaked one small testing motion, then stopped, as if the person realized they were being studied. Police headlights finally washed the living room. 2 officers walked the yard with flashlights, then crossed to the Webster house. They swept their beams up to the left window and lingered there. When they came back, one told me they'd found prints in the mud leading to the Grants gate and more on the Webster porch shoe prints with a worn right heel. No sign of anyone inside. The officers suggested blinds for the big window. The Grants got them the next day, thick and beige and almost smug-looking. Months later, a developer bought the Webster lot and tore the house down. It should have helped, but sometimes when I pass that patch of new lawn, I still feel watched. I think about the hand on the glass open, patient, and how it didn't want to break in. It wanted me to unbolt the door myself. Story 3. The static on the baby monitor. I was 17, and it was my first time with the Harts. New build, open floor plan, and everything a calming gray that looked like a furniture catalog. Their little boy, Caleb, had big eyes and the softest snore I've ever heard. He went down at 8 p.m. without a fight, clutching a stuffed giraffe.
It crackles sometimes, she said, embarrassed. It picks up interference from other houses.
The Harts left at 8:15. I did a circuit, front door locked, back slider latched, basement door closed. The house hummed in that new construction way. Fridge, HVAC, the occasional click in the ducts like someone politely clearing their throat. I took the video monitor to the living room, set it on the coffee table, and let a cooking show play low. The screen showed Caleb's crib from the corner. White rails, dim nightlight glow, a blob of toddler in sleep pose. Every 30 seconds the image rippled, like the camera was breathing. I told myself it was compression. The hair rose on my neck the way it does when a stranger says your name in a crowd. I stood and listened long enough for my ears to invent patterns. Then I backed out and returned downstairs, humiliated by how relieved I felt to find nothing. "Just downstairs, buddy," I whispered, trying to be breezy.
"It's interference, honey," she said, but she stayed on the line while I walked the floor plan, narrating. Front door locked, sliders locked, garage doors the keypad type, basement door closed.
I haven't babysat in a house with a monitor since, and if I hear static in a store or on TV, I still catch that second syllable, the one that isn't a word at all, just someone letting me know they practiced saying my name.